Hey everyone, welcome back to the fiction world. Today we're diving into an amazing story called What If Deku Conquered Asgard in God of War and Built a Divine Breeding Harem with Freya, Sif and all Valkyries. If you love these stories, please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us bring more content to you. Without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 1, Green Lightning in a Dead World. The dimensional rift spat Izuku out like a bad piece of meat. 1 second he was fighting Kurogiri's psychotic cousin, some villain with a quirk that tore holes in space itself, and the next second reality just stopped making sense. The warp gate he'd been trying to close from the inside twisted wrong, folded in on itself, and Izuku felt his atoms stretch across infinity. Then he hit water. Cold. Shockingly cold. Lake water flooded his nose and mouth as he plunged deep, the impact rattling his bones even through full cowling. His hero costume's mask had been torn off somewhere in transit, and the reinforced fabric along his left arm was shredded to ribbons. Izuku kicked hard, black whip shooting from his fingers to wrap around something solid above. The quirk yanked him upward through murky green water, and he breached the surface gasping. What? He coughed up lake water, treading in place while his eyes adjusted. Where? Mountains. Massive mountains ringed a lake so large he couldn't see the far shore. The water was still and mirror-flat except for the ripples from his landing. Strange ruins dotted the shoreline, stone structures that looked nothing like anything from Japan, or anywhere else he'd studied. No city sounds. No traffic. No distant hum of civilization. Just wind, water, and the cry of birds he didn't recognize. Izuku swam for the nearest shore, his mind already racing through possibilities. Dimensional displacement. Not unheard of, there were records of quirk-related incidents sending people to parallel worlds, alternate timelines, even pocket dimensions. The key was staying calm, gathering information, and finding a way home. He dragged himself onto rocky ground, water streaming from his damaged costume. His boots squelched with every step as he moved away from the lake's edge and took stock. Injuries, minor. Some cuts from the transit, bruising along his ribs, nothing serious. One for all was stable, he could feel all 6 quirks humming in the back of his mind like familiar friends. Equipment, his mask was gone. The arm bracers were damaged but functional. His utility belt was intact with basic supplies. No phone signal, which, yeah, different dimension, obviously. Surroundings, unknown. Clearly not his world. The architecture was wrong, the plants were wrong, even the sky looked different, slightly more golden than blue. Okay. Izuku took a breath. Okay. First step, find civilization. Second step, figure out the rules here. Third step, find a way home. He picked a direction, toward what looked like a larger structure on a hill, and started walking. The forest between the lake and the hill was dense and old. Really old. Trees thicker than cars, roots that created maze-like passages through the undergrowth, and shadows that seemed deeper than they should be given the daylight. Izuku moved carefully, senses alert. Danger sense hadn't triggered yet, but that didn't mean it triggered. He dove left without thinking, rolling across moss and coming up in a combat stance as something slammed into the ground where he'd been standing. Dirt and rock exploded outward. The thing that had attacked him was corpse-like. Rotted flesh clinging to bones, empty eye sockets glowing with pale blue light, rusted armor hanging off a frame that shouldn't have been able to move. It pulled a corroded sword from the crater it had made and turned toward him with jerky, unnatural movements. What the hell? Izuku breathed. 2 more emerged from the shadows. Then 4 more. Then a dozen. They came from all directions, weapons raised, moving in eerie silence except for the scrape of metal and the wet sound of decomposing flesh. Izuku's analysis kicked in automatically. Dead tissue. Animated somehow, magic. Technology. Quirk. Didn't matter right now. Slow movements but strong impact. Pack tactics, surrounding prey. Weakness unknown, but the head seemed important, the glow was concentrated there. 8% full cowling activated, green lightning crackling across his skin. Guess we're doing this. The first one reached him with an overhead sword swing. Izuku sidestepped, caught its wrist with Black Whip, and whipped the creature into 3 of its companions. They went down in a tangle of limbs and rust. 2 more came from his left. He launched himself forward with float assistance, soaring over their clumsy swings and delivering a spinning kick that took one's head clean off. The blue light in its eyes went out immediately. Heads it is, he confirmed. Black Whip snapped out in 4 directions at once, wrapping around necks and skulls. Izuku pulled hard, and 4 heads separated from 4 bodies in a spray of ancient dust and rotted meat. The remaining creatures converged on him. Izuku didn't back off, he charged. Delaware smashed to the first one's skull, caving it in. Elbow strike to the second, enhanced with 8% OFA, sending bone fragments flying. Black Whip grabbed a third and slammed it into a fourth. 5th and 6th came together, Izuku dropped low, swept their legs, then stomped on both heads before they could recover. 12 seconds. 12 enemies. Done. Izuku straightened, barely breathing hard. The green lightning faded from his skin as he dropped full cowling. Zombies, he muttered, looking at the scattered remains. Or something like them. Great. Wonderful. This is fine. He kept moving toward the hilltop structure. The structure turned out to be some kind of forge or workshop, long abandoned. Tools lay scattered across workbenches, not modern tools, but hammers, tongs, metalworking equipment that looked almost medieval. 2 distinct working areas suggested 2 different craftsmen, one workbench noticeably higher than the other. Izuku searched methodically but found nothing useful for getting home. No technology, no communication devices, nothing that even ran on electricity. Just metal, leather, and craftsmanship that seemed almost magical in its precision. Different world, he confirmed to himself. Pre-industrial, or maybe post-industrial collapse. Those dead things suggest something went very wrong here. A noise from outside. Different from the zombies, heavier footsteps, crackling sounds, and shouting. Human shouting. Izuku moved fast, exiting the forge and scaling a nearby cliff face with Black Whip assistance. From the higher vantage point, he could see a small settlement in a valley below, maybe 40 or 50 structures, wooden and stone, smoke rising from chimneys. And fire. Not chimney fire. Battle fire. Figures were attacking the settlement. Massive figures, twice the height of normal humans, their bodies wreathed in flames. They swung burning weapons and launched gouts of fire at the wooden buildings. People were running, screaming, trying to fight back with axes and swords that did nothing against the blazing attackers. Izuku didn't hesitate. Full cowling snapped on at 15%. He launched himself off the cliff, float adjusting his trajectory, and crossed the distance to the settlement in seconds. His first target never saw him coming. Izuku's diving kick connected with the back of a fire giant's knee, buckling the limb and sending the creature stumbling. Before it could recover, he was already moving, Black Whip wrapped around its neck, and he used the momentum to swing himself up and around, delivering an axe kick to the top of its skull. The giant went down hard, flames guttering. The other attackers turned toward him. Izuku counted fast, 8 more fire giants, all focused on destruction rather than any tactical objective. One was about to bring a burning hammer down on a family huddled against a stone wall. Smash! Izuku crossed the distance with float-assisted speed and hit the giant's arm before the hammer could fall. Bone shattered. The giant roared and swung at him with its other hand, but Izuku was already gone. 15% made him far faster than these things could track. Smokescreen erupted from his body, filling the village square with dark cover. The giant swung blindly, hitting nothing. Izuku moved through the smoke like a ghost, striking from angles they couldn't predict. Black Whip wrapped around a giant's ankle and pulled. It crashed down onto another giant, and Izuku was on them both before they could untangle. 2 precise strikes to the head, 2 enemies down. A gout of flame erupted through the smoke, forcing Izuku to dive. He rolled, came up, and saw the giant that had fired it, larger than the others, with darker flames and crude armor. Leader? Izuku guessed. The giant leader barked something in a language Izuku didn't understand and charged. 20% full cowling. Izuku met the charge head-on. The giant swung a massive fist, Izuku ducked under it and drove his own fist into the creature's solar plexus. The impact sent shockwaves through the smoke, dispersing it in a ring around them. The giant staggered but didn't go down. Tougher than the others. It grabbed for him with both hands. Izuku used float to launch straight up, avoiding the grab, then pulled himself back down with Black Whip wrapped around the giant's own arm. St. Louis, smash. His kick connected with the giant's jaw. The creature's head snapped back, fire streaming from its mouth, and it collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. The remaining giants saw their leader fall and hesitated. Izuku didn't give them time to recover. He moved through them like a green thunderbolt, strike, move, and in under a minute, all 8 lay defeated. Izuku stood in the center of the village, breathing hard. His costume was singed in several places, and he'd taken a glancing burn on his left forearm, but nothing serious. The green lightning of full cowling faded as he powered down. The villagers were staring at him. They looked human, or close to it. Taller than average, most of them, with a hardiness that suggested difficult lives. They wore rough-spun clothing and carried weapons that wouldn't have looked out of place in a Viking museum. A child was crying. An old woman was praying over a fallen man, her husband, maybe. 2 young people were trying to put out fires with buckets of water from a well. Normal people. Scared people. People who needed help. Hey. Izuku held up his hands, showing he meant no harm. It's okay. They're down. You're safe now. They didn't seem to understand his words, but his tone got through. The tension in the crowd eased slightly. Izuku moved to help with the fires, using bursts of Black Whip to knock down burning timbers and clear paths. A few villagers started following his lead, and within 20 minutes, the worst of the blazes were under control. He was helping an injured man to his feet when danger sense flared again. Izuku turned, dropping into a defensive stance, and stopped. The woman who had arrived was unlike the villagers. Tall, powerfully built, with long dark hair braided away from a face that looked like it had been carved from war and determination. She wore armor that gleamed despite its obvious battle damage, not the crude stuff the fire giants had worn, but real craftsmanship. A sword hung at her hip, and the way she held herself said she knew exactly how to use it. She was looking at the fallen fire giants with an expression of disbelief. Then she looked at Izuku. You. Her voice carried easily across the square. You did this? Izuku blinked. She was speaking, he understood her. Not Japanese, not English, but something that slotted directly into his comprehension as if he'd known it all his life. Dimensional translation effect. Magic? He filed it away as something to figure out later. Yeah. He straightened from his defensive stance but stayed alert. They were attacking the village. I stopped them. The woman approached, her stride long and confident. She stopped a few feet away and looked him over with sharp eyes that missed nothing, his damaged costume, the burns on his arm, the green-tinged residue of his quirk still fading from his skin. You're mortal, she said. It wasn't a question. Last time I checked. You have no divine weapon. No blessing I can sense. No runic enhancement. She gestured at the giants. Those are fire giants of Muspelheim. Even seasoned Einherjar struggle against one. You killed 9. They weren't that tough, Izuku said honestly. Slow, predictable attack patterns. Strong, but not smart about using that strength. The woman actually laughed, a short, sharp sound of genuine surprise. Not that tough. A mortal who calls fire giants not that tough. She shook her head. Who are you? Izuku Midoriya. I'm not from around here. Understatement of the century. I'm trying to figure out where I am and how to get home. Midoriya. She tested the name. I am Sif. Lady Sif, of Asgard, or what remains of it. Something flickered in her eyes at those last words. Pain, maybe. Loss. You are in Midgard. The realm of mortals. Realm, Izuku repeated. As in, multiple realms. Different worlds. 9, traditionally. Though the ways between them are complicated now. Sif studied him with renewed interest. You truly don't know? You're not from any of the 9 realms. I'm from Earth. Japan, specifically. But probably not your Earth. Izuku gestured vaguely at himself. Dimensional displacement. I was fighting someone whose power tears holes in reality, and I ended up here. Dimensional displacement, Sif murmured. That would explain why you feel wrong. Not wrong as in threatening, she added quickly, but wrong as in misplaced. Like a piece of a puzzle that doesn't fit any picture I know. That's weirdly accurate. Sif looked at the village around them, the damaged buildings, the wounded being tended, the bodies of fire giants cooling in the afternoon light. You saved these people. Without hesitation, without knowing them, without any reason to involve yourself. They were in danger. That's all the reason I need. The words came out simple and direct because that's all they were. Izuku had been raised on All Might's example, trained by heroes who taught him that the instinct to help wasn't something you debated, it was something you acted on. These people needed help. He could provide it. End of discussion. Sif was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded once, sharply, like she'd made a decision. I lead the survivors of Asgard, what few of us remain after Ragnarok. We're trying to rebuild, but we're stretched thin. Fire giant raids have been increasing, and we don't have enough warriors to protect every settlement that needs it. She met his eyes. I could use someone who fights like you, Izuku Midoriya. In exchange, I can offer shelter, resources, and access to people who might know how to get you home. Izuku considered it for about 3 seconds. He needed information, needed allies, needed to understand this world if he was going to survive in it long enough to find a way back. And Sif seemed genuine, a warrior, not a politician, offering a straightforward deal. Okay, he said. I'm in. The journey to Asgard was not what Izuku expected. Sif led him through the village, past grateful faces and murmured thanks, to a spot near the lake where a pattern was carved into the stone. She pressed her palm to the center of the pattern, spoke words in a language that sounded older than time, and the air split open. Rainbow light. That was the only way to describe it. A bridge of impossible colors materialized, stretching up and away into the sky. The Bifrost, Sif said. Or what we've managed to restore of it. It's not fully functional, we can only open it in specific locations, and the far end is fixed. But it beats walking. Izuku stared at the rainbow bridge. That's actually beautiful. It was more beautiful before. Before the Allfather's death. Before Ragnarok. Sif stepped onto the bridge without hesitation. Come. Asgard awaits. Walking on the Bifrost felt like walking on solid light. Izuku's feet found purchase where physics said they shouldn't, and the colors swirled around him like he was moving through a living aurora. Then they stepped off the bridge, and Izuku saw Asgard. His first thought was that it looked like a war zone. Golden spires lay toppled across streets of shattered marble. Buildings that must have once been magnificent stood as hollow shells, their roofs caved in and walls crumbling. Great statues had fallen, their carved faces staring blindly at the sky. Fires had blackened whole districts, and the damage looked both recent and ancient, layered like geological strata of catastrophe. But people were here. Moving through the ruins, clearing rubble, rebuilding. Izuku saw men and women in armor similar to Sif's, their movements purposeful if weary. He saw others in simpler clothes, craftspeople, healers, what might have been priests, going about the business of survival. Ragnarok, Sif said quietly, following his gaze across the destruction. The twilight of the gods. Prophecy said it would end everything. Instead, it just ended most things. The All-Father is dead. Thor is gone. Most of our warriors fell defending the realm or fleeing it. She paused. A ghost named Kratos and his son were at the center of it. Not the cause, exactly, but the catalyst. A ghost named Kratos, Izuku repeated. A long story. He came from another land, seeking peace, and found only war. His son is complicated. They're both gone now, pursuing their own path. Sif shook her head. The point is, this is what remains of the golden realm of the gods. A few hundred survivors trying to rebuild what took millennia to create. That's. Izuku looked at the workers, the rubble, the determination visible in every face. That's what survivors do, though. Rebuild. Sif glanced at him. You've seen destruction before. It wasn't a question, but Izuku answered anyway. Yeah. My world has had a lot of villains. People with power who used it to hurt others. I've fought in wars, defended cities, watched buildings fall. He watched a group of workers haul a chunk of golden stone into position. But there's always someone willing to rebuild. That's the part that matters. Sif's expression shifted, still guarded, but with something new in her eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Come. I'll introduce you to the others. Fair warning, not everyone will welcome you as I have. Story of my life, Izuku said. The central hall of Asgard, what remained of it, had been converted into a combination command center and meeting space. Great pillars still stood, though several were cracked or missing chunks. A massive table dominated the center, covered with maps, reports, and the debris of ongoing crisis management. About a dozen people were gathered when Sif led Izuku in. Most wore armor, a few wore robes. All of them turned to look at the newcomer with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. Who's this? The speaker was a young man, blonde hair, handsome features, clothes that were slightly too fine for the surroundings. He carried himself with the casual arrogance of someone who had never been told no. Someone who just killed 9 fire giants with his bare hands, Sif replied. Everyone, this is Izuku Midoriya. He's not from the 9 realms, and no, I don't understand it either. But he saved a village in Midgard without being asked, and I've invited him to help us. Murmurs rippled through the room. The blond man stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. You invited a mortal, an outsider, to Asgard? Without consultation? Without proper vetting? There wasn't time for bureaucracy, Forseti. People were dying. There's always time for proper procedure. Forseti looked at Izuku with open disdain. 9 fire giants. With bare hands. Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. I don't care if you believe it. The words came out of Izuku before he could consider diplomacy. He was tired, burned, covered in soot and dried giant blood, and he hadn't eaten in hours. I did it. People are alive because I did it. What you believe is your business. Forseti's eyes widened slightly. Clearly he wasn't used to being spoken to like that. Bold words for a mortal in the Hall of Gods. I've fought gods before. Izuku matched his stare. Or people who called themselves that. Turns out the label doesn't mean as much as the person wearing it. Silence. Dead silence. Then someone laughed. She came through a side entrance, Another woman in armor, this one with wings folded against her back and a spear in hand. Her hair was shorter than Sif's, her build stockier, and her grin was the kind that preceded either a celebration or a brawl. "I like him," she announced. "Where'd you find this one, Sif?" "Midgard." He was punching fire giants into paste while the villagers watched. Sif allowed herself a small smile. "Hildr, meet Izuku Midoriya." "Izuku, this is Hildr. She's one of the Valkyries." "The Valkyries?" Izuku's analytical mind kicked in despite his exhaustion. "Choosers of the slain. You escort fallen warriors to the afterlife?" "When there was an afterlife to escort them to." Hildr's grin faded slightly. "Valhalla fell with the All-Father. Now we just fight. Train the Einherjar. Try to remember what we were for." She shook it off and approached Izuku with obvious interest. 9 fire giants, huh? I want a demonstration." "Hildr," Sif warned. "What? If he can do what you say, he's useful. If he can't, we find out now before he gets people killed." Hildr twirled her spear casually. "How about it, Green One? Got enough left in the tank for a quick spar?" Izuku considered his injuries, his energy levels, and the tactical value of demonstrating his abilities to this crowd. A spar. Not a fight to the death. Obviously. Hildr looked offended. "What kind of people do you think we are?" "The kind who call themselves gods and live in a place called the realm of the gods," Izuku said. "I'm working with limited information here." Another laugh from Hildr. "Fair point. Courtyard's through there. Sif, you coming?" "Wouldn't miss it." The courtyard was a cleared space amid the rubble, large enough for serious combat training. Practice dummies and weapon racks lined the edges, and a few other warriors had drifted over to watch as word spread that the newcomer was about to face a Valkyrie. Hildr took position across from Izuku, spear at the ready. "Rules: no killing strikes, fight until one of us yields or can't continue. No interference from observers." She paused. "Any questions?" "Just one." Izuku dropped into a combat stance, letting 15% full cowling flicker to life around him. Green lightning crackled across his skin, illuminating the fading daylight. "Are you going to be mad if you lose?" Hildr's eyes went wide for a moment, clearly she hadn't expected him to glow, and then her grin came back twice as fierce. "Now we're talking." She moved first. Valkyries were fast. Izuku's danger sense screamed warning as Hildr crossed the distance between them in what should have been impossible time, her spear thrusting for his center mass. He twisted, letting the spear pass through the space where his torso had been, and struck at her extended arm. Hildr pulled back before the blow could land, spinning her spear into a defensive position. "Quick," she acknowledged. "Let's see how quick." The next exchange happened faster than most observers could follow. Spear strikes, dodges, counterattacks, Hildr's divine weapon whistling through the air while Izuku's OFA-enhanced limbs met it again and again. She wasn't just fast, she was skilled. Centuries of combat experience showed in every movement, every feint, every perfectly timed shift in footwork. Her fighting style had no wasted motion, no telegraph strikes, nothing for Izuku to exploit through pattern recognition. So he stopped trying to be clever and just went harder. 20%. Izuku's next block didn't just stop Hildr's strike, it knocked the spear aside with force that made her stumble. Before she could recover, Black Whip shot from his other hand, wrapping around her ankle. Hildr snarled and cut the tendril with a slash of her spear, but Izuku was already moving. He came in low, under her guard, and got his shoulder into her midsection. They hit the ground together, rolling. Hildr tried to create space, Izuku didn't let her. Black Whip entangled her weapon arm while he grabbed her other wrist, pinning her to the courtyard stones. For a moment they were frozen like that, Izuku on top, Hildr beneath him, both breathing hard. Her wings were spread awkwardly under her weight. His face was inches from hers. Yield? Izuku asked. Hilda looked up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're strong. I've worked at it. And fast. And those black tendrils. She flexed against his grip experimentally. He didn't budge. I can't break free. No. Hildra's grin came back, slower this time, with more layers to it. You fight like a god. But you touch me like you're afraid I'll break. Izuku blinked. What? Your grip. Firm but not crushing. You're holding back. She tilted her head against the stone. How strong are you, really? Strong enough. He released her and stood, offering a hand. That's not how I fight when I'm really trying. Hilda took the hand and let him pull her up. She didn't let go immediately. Then we'll have to do this again. At full strength. Her eyes held his. I want to see what you're capable of, Izuku Midoriya. Hilda. Sif's voice cut through the moment. You're drooling. I am not. Hilda finally released Izuku's hand. I'm evaluating. Strategically. Of course you are. The crowd of observers had grown during the fight. Izuku saw a mix of expressions, surprise, interest, in some cases suspicion. Forseti was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. A new voice spoke up from the edge of the courtyard. Well. That was unexpected. Izuku turned. The woman who approached was different. Where Sif and Hilda radiated warrior energy, this one moved like a scholar, or maybe a general. Her armor was present but understated, and she carried no visible weapons. Her eyes tracked across Izuku with the calculating gaze of someone who saw the world in terms of tactics and probabilities. Gondal, Sif greeted her. Your assessment. Interesting. Gondal stopped at Izuku's side, looking him over like he was a puzzle to solve. Your fighting style is unusual. Hybrid close combat with integrated binding techniques. The glowing effect appears to be some form of energy enhancement, bioelectric, maybe, but with properties I don't recognize. And you fought at what I estimate to be significantly reduced capacity due to your existing injuries. She met his eyes. How did I do? Pretty good. Izuku found himself smiling despite his exhaustion. The energy enhancement is called One for All. It's complicated. And you're right that I was holding back. A quirk, then. From your world. You know about quirks. I know about many things. Gondal's expression didn't change, but there was something almost like respect in her tone. I'm the strategist for what remains of our forces. It's my job to understand capabilities, ours and others. You just made my job considerably more interesting. Forseti pushed forward from the crowd. This is absurd. One spar proves nothing. The creature could be a threat, a spy for whom? Sif interrupted. You heard him. He's not from the Nine Realms. He has no connection to our enemies. So he claims. He killed fire giants, Forseti. Muspelheim is actively raiding our settlements, and you're worried about the one person who's actually stopping them? The argument continued, but Izuku tuned it out. His attention had been caught by something else, a sigil drawn in the dirt of the courtyard, probably scuffed there during the fight. He crouched down to look at it. Blackened lines, as if burned into the ground rather than merely drawn. A pattern he didn't recognize but that triggered something in his analytical mind. Gondal. He pointed at the sigil. What is this? The strategist Valkyrie moved to his side, and her expression flickered. That wasn't there before the fight. I know. I think I tracked it in on my boot. Izuku had a flash of memory, similar marks on the ground near the fallen fire giants, marks he dismissed as battlefield debris. What does it mean? Gondal studied the sigil with growing concern. I don't know. And that worries me. I know most of the runic systems across the 9 realms. This is something else. She looked at him. You saw this where you fought the giants? Yeah. I thought it was it's not just anything. Gondal stood abruptly. Sif. We have a problem. The argument between Sif and Forseti broke off. Everyone's attention focused on the sigil. The fire giant raids aren't random, Gondal continued. They're coordinated. And now this, a mark none of us recognize, left at multiple attack sites. Someone is directing them. Someone with knowledge outside our experience. Silence fell over the courtyard. Sif looked at the sigil, then at Izuku, then at Gondal. Can you investigate? I'll need to see the other sites. Compare the marks, look for patterns. Gondal hesitated. I'll need someone to watch my back. Fire giants might return to any location they've already hit. I'll go, Izuku said immediately. You just arrived. You're injured. Sif's brow furrowed. You should rest. I heal fast. It was true, One for All accelerated his recovery significantly. And I'm the one who noticed the marks. If we're looking for patterns, having me there might help. Gondal nodded slowly. He has a point. Fresh eyes, analytical mind, I saw how he was processing during the fight. He thinks tactically. She looked at Sif. I want him with me. Sif considered for a long moment. Then she nodded. Fine. But you're both back before nightfall. These ruins aren't safe after dark. Understood. As Izuku followed Gondal out of the courtyard, he heard Hildra call after him, Don't get killed, Green One. We have a rematch scheduled. Wouldn't dream of it, he called back. The investigation took them to 3 separate sites across Midgard, all villages or settlements that had been hit by fire giant raids in the past week. At each location, Izuku found the same sigil, burned into stone or earth near where giants had fallen. It's definitely a calling card, Gondal murmured at the 3rd site, sketching the sigil into a notebook. Or maybe a claiming mark. Someone wants us to know they're behind this. Who has power over fire giants? Izuku asked. I thought you said they come from Muspelheim. They do. The realm of fire, ruled by, well, it was Surtur. The fire giant king, destined to burn the world at Ragnarok. Gondal's pen paused. He fulfilled that destiny. Used himself as a weapon against Asgard. He should be dead. Gone. No more. Should be. Should be. Gondal's expression was troubled. But Surtur had a queen. Sinmara. She was bound to him, when he died, she should have diminished to nothing. But if she survived somehow, regained power. She could be directing the raids. It would explain the coordination. The targeting. The marks. Gondal closed her notebook. But it should be impossible. Ragnarok was supposed to end them. End everything. Izuku looked out across the damaged village. In my experience, supposed to doesn't count for much. People find ways to survive. To come back. To keep fighting even when everyone says they shouldn't be able to. Personal experience. Very personal. Izuku thought of All for One. Of the League of Villains. Of every enemy who should have been beaten but kept getting back up. If this Sinmara is behind the attacks, we need to find out what she wants. What she's building toward. Agreed. Gondal started walking back toward the Bifrost Point. I need to report this to Sif. And we need to bring in more expertise. What kind of expertise? Gondal didn't answer immediately. Her expression was complicated, something between reluctance and necessity. There's someone who knows more about the fire realms than anyone in Asgard. Someone who's had direct contact with Muspelheim's power. Why do I sense a but coming? Because the person I'm thinking of is Freya, Queen of the Vanir, former wife of Odin, and the woman most likely to kill anyone from Asgard on sight. Oh. Izuku processed this. Yeah, that does sound like a, but. They returned to Asgard as the sun was setting. Sif was waiting for them at the Bifrost terminus, her expression tight with concern. What did you find? Gondal gave her report concisely, the sigils, the coordination theory, the possibility that Sinmara had somehow survived Ragnarok. With each word, Sif's expression grew darker. Freya, she said when Gondal finished. You want to contact Freya? I don't want to. But she's the only one who might know what Sinmara is capable of. What she's planning. Freya hates us. She hates everything associated with Odin. She hates what Odin did to her, Gondal corrected. And he's dead now. Her grievance is with a corpse. Tell that to her. Sif ran a hand through her hair, a rare gesture of frustration. Fine. I'll send an envoy to Vanaheim. Request a meeting. That could take weeks. We might not have weeks. Then what do you suggest? Before Gondal could answer, the Bifrost flared. Not a controlled activation, a violent surge of rainbow energy, forcing itself open from the other side. Sif drew her sword instantly. Guards moved to defensive positions. Izuku dropped into a combat stance, full cowling flickering to life. When the light cleared, a woman stood at the terminus. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with features or form, a beauty that came from the sheer power radiating off her in waves. Silver hair flowed past her shoulders. Her dress might have been woven from starlight and autumn leaves. And her eyes. Her eyes were ancient. Grieving. And absolutely furious. You don't need to send an envoy, Freya said, her voice carrying across the sudden silence like a blade through silk. I'm already here. She looked around at the Asgardians, the damaged realm, the guards with their weapons drawn. Her lip curled. I come with news of Sinmara. But first. Her gaze locked onto Izuku, and something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe. Confusion. Who is this? His energy is wrong. He doesn't belong here. That's what I keep telling everyone, Versetti muttered from somewhere behind the guards. Sif stepped forward, placing herself between Freya and Izuku, though it wasn't clear which of them she was protecting from the other. He's an ally. A traveler from another realm. He's been helping us. Helping you. Freya's eyes didn't leave Izuku. A mortal helping gods. How quaint. She stepped forward, and the guards parted around her like water. Not from command, from sheer force of presence. You. Green one. What are you? Izuku met her gaze without flinching. He'd faced All for One. He'd faced the full fury of villains who wanted to tear the world apart. An angry goddess was intimidating, sure, but he'd learned long ago that showing fear only made things worse. I'm Izuku Midoriya. I'm from a different dimension. I have power that's been passed down through generations. He let full cowling pulse brighter, briefly, showing her a fraction of what he carried. I don't know how to get home, so I'm doing what I do. Helping people. Freya was silent for a long moment. Her eyes searched his face, looking for something. You're sincere, she said finally. That's either refreshing or incredibly naive. I haven't decided which. Probably both. The ghost of a smile crossed her face, there and gone. Probably. She turned to Sif. I came because Sinmara's forces have reached Vanaheim. My realm. My people. I've driven them back, but they'll return, and in greater numbers. Her jaw tightened. Whatever she's planning, it's not limited to Asgard. She means to consume all 9 realms. Then we need to work together, Gondal said. Pool our knowledge, coordinate our defenses. I don't work with Asgardians. With respect, Queen Freya, you're standing in Asgard right now. Freya's eyes flashed dangerously. Because I had no choice. The Bifrost was the fastest way to bring warning. But don't mistake necessity for alliance. People are going to die, Izuku said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. People are dying right now, he continued. Villages getting burned. Families losing their homes. Warriors falling to enemies they don't understand. He held Freya's gaze. You're powerful. That's obvious. And you hate Asgard, that's your business. But whatever happened between you and these people, it's not the fault of the villagers in Midgard. It's not the fault of the kids who'll burn when the next raid comes. Freya's expression was unreadable. You presume to lecture me, mortal. I'm not lecturing. I'm asking. Izuku took a step toward her, not aggressive, just direct. Help us stop Sinmara. After that, hate whoever you want. But right now, people need you. Are you going to let them die because of old grudges? The silence stretched. Izuku could feel Sif tense beside him, ready to intervene if Freya took offense. Could feel Gondel calculating odds. Could feel Hildra's eagerness for a fight radiating from somewhere behind him. Then Freya laughed. It wasn't a happy sound, more like the release of tension, the crack in armor that had been held rigid too long. You have no idea what you're asking. No concept of what Odin did to me. To my son. Her voice caught on the last word. But you're right. The dead are dead. The living still need protection. She turned to Sif. I will share what I know of Sinmara. I will coordinate with your forces against her. But I am not your ally, and I am not your friend. Is that clear? Crystal, Sif said. We have a war council chamber. This way. As the group moved toward the central hall, Izuku fell into step near the back. His body was screaming for rest, the burns from the earlier fight, the exertion of sparring with Hild, the accumulated stress of everything that had happened since he'd crashed into this world. But his mind was racing. Sinmara. Fire giants. 9 realms at risk. Political tensions between factions that should be working together. A queen who carried pain so deep it had calcified into hatred. A society trying to rebuild after apocalypse. He'd been thrown into the middle of something huge. Something that made the villain incidents back home look simple. But then, he'd never let scale stop him before. Midoriya. He looked up. Sif had dropped back to walk beside him while the others moved ahead. Thank you, she said. For what you said to Freya. I just told her the truth. The truth she needed to hear, from someone she had no reason to distrust. Sif's eyes were thoughtful. You have a talent for that. Cutting through the complications to what matters. I've had good teachers. Sif was quiet for a moment. Then, you're exhausted. After the council session, I'll show you to quarters. You need rest. I need answers more. Who's Sinmara really? What's her endgame? How did she survive when she was supposed to die with Surtur? Questions for the council. Sif paused at the entrance to the great hall. But Midoriya, don't burn yourself out in the first day. Whatever's coming, we're going to need you standing. I don't know how to stop, Izuku admitted. Not when people are in danger. Then learn. Sif pushed open the doors. Heroes who can't rest become heroes who die young. And I need you to live. Before he could respond, she was through the doors and taking her place at the council table. Izuku stood in the doorway for a moment, processing her words. Then he followed. The war council was a tense affair. Freya shared what she knew. Sinmara had been rebuilding herself slowly in Muspelheim's depths, feeding on residual chaos energy from Ragnarok. The sigils were binding marks, linking the fire giants to her will, making them extensions of her consciousness rather than independent raiders. She's testing defenses, Freya concluded. Mapping weaknesses. When she's ready, she'll strike in force, and not just at one realm. All of them. Simultaneously. How do we stop her? Sif asked. You don't. Not with what you have. Freya's tone was flat. She's a primordial entity. Even diminished, she's beyond what any of us can face alone. Then we face her together, Izuku said. Freya looked at him. You keep saying things like that. As if unity is simple. As if old hatreds can be set aside with a few words. They can't. But they can be set aside for a common purpose, long enough to survive. Izuku met her gaze. I've seen enemies work together against bigger threats. It's not easy. It's messy and complicated and usually falls apart after the crisis passes. But during the crisis, it works. Your optimism is almost painful. So I've been told. The council continued. Plans were made, or the beginnings of plans, at least. Defensive positions would be strengthened. Valkyrie patrols would be coordinated across realms. Communication lines would be established. And Izuku would join Sif on a mission to one of the more remote fire giant encampments, to gather intelligence on Sinmara's forces. First thing tomorrow, Sif said as the council broke. Get some sleep, Midoriya. We leave at dawn. Sleep sounded amazing. Izuku let Sif lead him to a small but comfortable chamber in what remained of the palace, 4 walls, a bed, a window looking out over the damaged city. He collapsed onto the bed without bothering to remove his damaged costume. Just a few hours, he told himself. Then back to work. He was asleep in seconds. Izuku woke to the sound of something heavy hitting the ground outside his window. He was on his feet instantly, full cowling flickering to life, scanning the darkness for threats. The window showed Asgard's skyline, lit by fires and torches, nothing immediately wrong. Then he saw the smoke rising from the outer walls. Damn it! He didn't bother with the door, float carried him through the window and across the rooftops toward the disturbance. Below, he could see guards running, weapons drawn. Could hear shouting in the distance. The outer wall had a hole in it. Not a big hole, maybe 10 feet across, but enough to admit the fire giant that was currently rampaging through the lower city. Just one giant, but it was doing a lot of damage. Buildings were burning. Guards were scattered. And the giant was moving with purpose, not random destruction, heading toward the palace. Toward the place where the council had met. Where the leaders had gathered. Reconnaissance, Izuku muttered. Or assassination attempt. Either way, it ended now. He hit the giant at 40%. The impact rocked the creature backward, flames guttering. Izuku didn't let up, black whip tendrils wrapped around its arms while he drove his fist into its chest, again and again, each blow carrying the force of a small explosion. The giant roared and tried to grab him. Danger sense screamed, Izuku twisted away and used float to reposition above its head. St. Louis smash. His kick connected with the giant's skull. The creature's head snapped to the side, and it collapsed in a heap of cooling flames. Izuku landed beside it, breathing hard. The fight had taken maybe 30 seconds. Guards arrived moments later, weapons ready for a threat that was already neutralized. Sif came running behind them, sword drawn, her expression fierce. Midoriya. I'm fine. He gestured at the fallen giant. It was heading for the palace. Deliberately. Sif's eyes narrowed. You think it was sent specifically? It knew where the council met. Where the leaders would be sleeping. Izuku looked at the breach in the wall. Sinmara's testing us. Or sending a message. Or both. Freya appeared from the shadows near the palace, her magic crackling around her hands. She looked at the fallen giant, then at Izuku, and her expression was complicated. "You really did kill fire giants with your bare hands," she said. "Told you." "I know. But hearing and seeing are different things." She moved closer to the giant's body, examining it. "This one has the binding sigil." Sinmara was watching through its eyes. "Then she knows what I can do." "She does now." Freya straightened and met his gaze. "Which means you've become a target, Izuku Midoriya. Sinmara doesn't tolerate threats to her plans." "Good." Izuku cracked his knuckles. "I'd rather she focus on me than civilians." Freya stared at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "You're either the bravest mortal I've ever met or the most foolish. Can't it be both?" This time, her almost smile lasted a full second before vanishing. Sif organized guards to secure the breach and patrol for other intrusions. Hildra arrived with a squad of Valkyries, looking energized by the prospect of action. Gondal appeared with her notebook, already analyzing the giant's remains for intelligence. And Izuku stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by gods and warriors and ancient powers, and felt something he hadn't felt since arriving in this world. Purpose. He didn't know how to get home. He didn't know if he ever would. But here, right now, people needed help. A threat was rising. And he had the power to make a difference. That was enough. "Hey, Green One." Hildra called. "Nice kill. Ready for that rematch yet?" "After I eat something," Izuku called back. "And maybe sleep for more than 3 hours." Excuses. The banter continued as the immediate crisis was managed. But Izuku noticed something as he watched the assembled Asgardians work. They were looking at him differently now. Not with suspicion or curiosity, but with something closer to respect. He'd proven himself. Not through words or credentials, but through action. And as the sun began to rise over the damaged walls of Asgard, Izuku allowed himself a moment of hope. This wasn't his world. These weren't his people, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, they could be. Chapter 2, The Mortal Who Moved Mountains. Izuku had been in Asgard for 3 weeks, and he'd stopped counting the days since week 2. There wasn't time. Every morning brought new reports of fire giant activity across the realms. Every afternoon meant training sessions with Einherjar, who needed to learn how to fight enemies that regenerated and burned. Every evening was spent in war councils where ancient grudges made simple planning feel like pulling teeth. But things were changing. Slowly. Measurably. "The south wall reinforcements are complete," Izuku said, pointing at the map spread across the council table. "I've got the work crews moving to the eastern gate next. Should be done in 4 days if the weather holds." Forseti scoffed from his position across the table. A mortal directing Asgardian construction crews. The ancestors must be spinning in their graves. "The ancestors are dead," Sif said flatly. "The walls are standing. Pick one to care about." Izuku ignored the exchange. He'd learned that Forseti's complaints were reflexive at this point. The man couldn't help himself. What mattered was that the work got done, and it was getting done faster than anyone had expected. The trick was simple. Izuku applied the same analytical thinking to logistics that he used for combat. Where were the bottlenecks? What resources were being underutilized? Which crews worked best together? He'd spent hours walking construction sites, talking to workers, understanding their problems. Then he'd fixed those problems. One at a time. Until the whole system ran smoother. "The Einherjar training schedules have been updated," Gondal added, consulting her ever-present notebook. "We're rotating squads through the new combat drills Midoriya designed. Early results are promising. Response times to fire giant tactics have improved by 30%. 30% in 3 weeks, Hildra said with a grin. Not bad for a mortal. Could be better." Izuku frowned at the map. "The patrol routes still have gaps. If Sinmara hits us at the right moment, she won't." Freya's voice cut through the discussion. She stood near the window, arms crossed, watching the proceedings with her usual air of reluctant participation. Not yet. She's still gathering strength. The raids are probes, not attacks. How can you be sure? Because I know her. Freya turned to face the council. Sinmara doesn't do anything without absolute certainty of victory. She'll test, measure, calculate. And when she's ready, she'll strike with overwhelming force. Then we need to be ready before she is, Izuku said. Obviously. The question is how. The council devolved into its usual arguments, Forseti advocating for traditional Asgardian defensive formations, Sif pushing for more aggressive patrols, Hildur wanting to take the fight directly to Muspelheim. Izuku listened, processed, and waited for the right moment to speak. It didn't come. The meeting ended without resolution, as most of them did. Same time tomorrow, Sif said, rubbing her temples. Maybe we'll actually accomplish something. The council dispersed. Izuku gathered his notes, rough sketches of tactical formations, supply calculations, training schedules, and headed for the door. Midoriya. He turned. Forseti had hung back, waiting until the others were gone. His expression was strange, not hostile exactly, but complicated. A word. Izuku tensed slightly but nodded. Sure. Forseti moved closer, his voice dropping. I don't like you. I want that to be clear. You're a mortal with no right to be here, making decisions that should be made by Aesir. Noted. But. Forseti's jaw tightened like the word physically pained him. The soldiers listen to you. The construction crews work harder when you're around. Even the Valkyries, he cut himself off. You have something. I don't know what to call it. But the people follow you. Izuku waited. I've been watching. Forseti's eyes were sharp, calculating. 3 weeks ago, you were a stranger. Now, half the Einherjar know your name. They call you Green Thunder. They tell stories about the fire giants you killed. I'm just trying to help. That's what makes it worse. Forseti stepped closer. You're not trying to accumulate power. You're not building a faction. You're just helping. And somehow that makes people trust you more than they trust me. Is that what this is about? Trust? This is about legitimacy. Forseti's voice hardened. I am the grandson of Baldr. I have divine blood. I have every legal right to lead what remains of Asgard. But you walk in from nowhere, with no lineage, no claim, no right, and people look to you. Izuku considered his response carefully. This wasn't a fight he could win with fists. Forseti, he said slowly, I don't want your throne. I don't want to lead Asgard. I just want to help people survive what's coming. That's what you say now. But power has a way of changing people. Then watch me. Izuku met his eyes directly. Watch what I do, not what I might do. And when this is over, when Sinmara is beaten, I'll leave. Find a way home. You can have your throne without me anywhere near it. Forseti studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, sharply. We'll see. He turned and walked away. We'll see. Izuku watched him go, feeling the weight of a problem he hadn't anticipated. Political complications on top of military ones. A rival who saw him as a threat simply because other people trusted him. Great. Just what he needed. The training grounds behind the palace had become Izuku's second home. Every spare hour he had, which weren't many, he spent there, either drilling Einherjar or working on his own techniques. Today it was the latter. He needed to push his limits, figure out exactly what he could do in this world. The fire giants were getting stronger with each raid, and Sinmara was still out there, gathering power. 40% full cowling. Green lightning crackled across his skin as he moved through combat forms. Punches that shattered the air. Kicks that left afterimages. Movement patterns that would have been invisible to normal human eyes. 50%. His body screamed in protest, not as badly as it used to, but the strain was still there. He'd been pushing himself hard for weeks, and the accumulated wear was building up. 60%. The training dummy in front of him disintegrated under a single punch. Stone and wood exploded outward in a shower of debris that Black Whip caught before it could damage anything else. Impressive. Izuku spun, dropping to 40%. Freya stood at the edge of the training grounds, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. How long have you been there? Long enough. She moved closer, her steps silent on the stone. That power of yours. It's killing you. Izuku's jaw tightened. I'm fine. Don't insult me. I've been healing magic since before your ancestors crawled out of caves. Freya stopped a few feet away. I can see the damage. Microfractures in your bones. Torn muscle fibers that never healed right. Stress patterns in your joints that suggest years of abuse. I know my body. Do you? Or do you just ignore it when it tells you to stop? The accuracy of the observation stung. Izuku had spent years ignoring pain, pushing through injuries, treating his body as a tool to be used rather than something to be cared for. It was how he'd learned to fight. How he'd earned his power. But Freya wasn't wrong. The first time I used this power, he said quietly, I broke my finger. Then my arm. Then I broke the same arm again, and again, until my bones developed stress fractures just from existing. He held up his right hand, showing the faint scarring that remained. I had to learn control the hard way. By failing, over and over, until I figured it out. Freya's expression shifted. And now? Now I can use about 60% without breaking anything. Higher than that, and the damage starts building up faster than I can heal. Yet you pushed to 60% just now. In training. With no enemies present. I need to know my limits. You need to be alive to fight Sinmara. Freya moved even closer. Sit down. What? Sit. Down. Her voice brooked no argument. I'm going to do something I'll probably regret. Izuku hesitated, then sat on a nearby bench. Freya knelt beside him, the queen of the Vanir, kneeling on dusty stone, and placed her hands on his shoulders. Warmth flooded through him. Not heat like fire, but the warmth of sunlight, of growth, of life itself. He felt it spreading through his body, finding the damaged places, the weaknesses he'd learned to ignore. Be still, Freya murmured. This will take some time. Izuku obeyed, too surprised to do anything else. The sensation was strange, not painful, but intense. Like his body was being read, analyzed, understood at a level deeper than physical. You've been fighting since you were young, Freya said. It wasn't a question. Since I was 14. And before that? Before that I was. Izuku paused. The memories were complicated. Before that I was nobody. No power. No quirk. Just a kid who wanted to be a hero. But you became one anyway. I met someone who believed in me. Who saw something worth investing in. Izuku closed his eyes as another wave of warmth passed through his joints. He gave me his power. Passed it down, like an inheritance. And I've been trying to live up to that gift ever since. Freya was quiet for a long moment. Her hands continued their work, healing damage he hadn't even known was there. You remind me of someone, she said finally. Someone I knew a long time ago. Before Odin. Before everything went wrong. Who? My son. The word came out rough, edged with pain. Baldur. He was good. Truly good, in a way that's rare among gods. He wanted to help people, protect them, make the realms better. Her voice cracked. And I destroyed him. With my love. With my fear. Izuku didn't know the full story. Sif had told him pieces, Gondel more, but the details were still unclear. What he knew was that Freya had cursed her son to be invulnerable, and that the curse had driven him mad over centuries. That he'd died eventually, at the hands of the ghost named Kratos. You were trying to protect him, Izuku said. I was trying to control fate. Freya's hands trembled slightly against his shoulders. I couldn't accept that he might die, so I took away his ability to feel anything. I thought I was saving him. Instead I condemned him to a living death. That's not the same as what you're doing now. Healing instead of controlling. Isn't it? Freya pulled back, and Izuku felt the warmth fade. I'm helping you because you remind me of him. Because seeing you push yourself to destruction reminds me of watching him suffer. Is that healing, or is it me trying to fix my own guilt? Izuku stood, testing his body. The difference was remarkable, joints moved smoothly, muscles responded without the background ache he'd grown accustomed to. He felt better than he had in months. Maybe it's both, he said. Maybe the reason doesn't matter as much as the result. Freya rose to her feet, her expression complicated. You're too forgiving. Probably. Izuku smiled slightly. But I'd rather forgive too much than too little. The other way leads to bitterness. And bitterness doesn't help anyone. Sometimes bitterness is all you have left. Then find something else. Izuku met her eyes. You're helping us fight Sinmara. You're healing my injuries. You're here, in Asgard, working with people you hate. That's not bitterness. That's choice. Freya stared at him. Her mouth opened, closed. For a moment she looked almost vulnerable, not the ancient queen, not the grieving mother, just a woman trying to find her footing in a world that had taken everything from her. Then the mask slid back into place. Your optimism is exhausting, she said. But there was no real heat in the words. So I've been told. Freya turned to leave, then paused. The damage to your body is deeper than I can heal in one session. If you want, I can continue tomorrow. I'd appreciate that. Don't read too much into it. I simply can't afford to have you collapse in the middle of battle. She walked away without looking back. Izuku watched her go, wondering if he'd imagined the faint warmth in her voice at the end. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. More construction, more training, more council meetings that went in circles. Freya returned twice more to continue healing him, each session lasting longer than the last. She didn't speak much during these sessions, but somehow the silence was comfortable rather than awkward. Hildr ambushed him for sparring matches at increasingly random times, once while he was eating lunch, once immediately after a council meeting, and once at 3 in the morning when she claimed she couldn't sleep. Each fight lasted longer than the previous one. Hildr was adapting to his style, learning his patterns, forcing him to innovate. And he was learning her patterns too, the tells that preceded her fastest strikes, the momentary hesitations before her most committed attacks. You're getting better, she said after their 5th match, both of them lying flat on the training ground, staring at the sky. That last combination almost took my head off. You're still faster than me, Izuku admitted. When you go all out, I can barely track you. But you do track me. That's the thing. Hildr turned her head to look at him. Most people can't. Most gods can't. But you see it coming. How? I have a quirk for danger. It warns me when an attack is coming, gives me a split second to react. That's cheating. Says the woman with divine wings and a magical spear. Hildr laughed. Fair point. She was quiet for a moment. You know, when Sif first brought you here, I thought you were a joke. A mortal? In Asgard? Helping us fight fire giants? What do you think now? Now I think. She sat up, looking down at him with an expression that made his pulse quicken. "Now I think you might be the most interesting thing that's happened to me in centuries." "Is that good or bad?" "Yes." She grinned and got to her feet, offering him a hand. "Same time tomorrow?" "Wouldn't miss it." Their fingers touched as she pulled him up, and she didn't let go immediately. Her grip was warm, strong, and lingered just a beat longer than necessary. Then she was walking away, her wings catching the sunlight as she moved. Izuku watched her go and tried to convince himself his racing heart was just from the exercise. The attack came on a Tuesday. Izuku was in the middle of a coordination meeting with Gondal, refining patrol schedules, analyzing recent giant activity patterns, when the first explosion shook the palace. They were on their feet instantly, running for the door. Shouts and alarms echoed through the corridors. Somewhere nearby, something roared. The palace courtyard was chaos. Fire giants, at least 20 of them, were pouring through a breach in the eastern wall. But they weren't alone. Something bigger loomed behind them, a towering figure of flame and black metal that stood 3 times the height of a normal giant. "What the hell is that?" Izuku demanded. Gondal's face had gone pale. "A fire colossus. I've read about them, but I've never seen one. They're war constructs, created by Sinmara specifically to siege fortifications. How do we kill it?" The historical records suggest concentrated divine weaponry, sustained assault by multiple Valkyries, or... She swallowed. "Or you don't." Option 1. Izuku activated full cowling. "Where's Sif?" "Leading the defense at the main gate. The giants are hitting us from multiple directions." "Freya?" "Unknown. She was in Vanaheim when, another explosion. A section of the palace wall collapsed, crushing several Einherjar beneath falling stone. The Colossus was advancing, fire streaming from its joints, each step shaking the ground. "Go find Sif," Izuku said. "Tell her I'm engaging the Colossus. Coordinate the Valkyries, I need them to handle the regular giants while I keep this thing busy. You can't fight that alone. I'm not planning to win. I'm planning to buy time." Izuku launched himself into the air with float, black whip tendrils extending behind him. "Go." Gondal ran. Izuku flew straight at the Colossus. 50% full cowling. He hit the creature at full speed, fist connecting with its midsection. The impact created a shockwave that sent nearby giants tumbling, and the Colossus actually staggered back a step. But it didn't fall. And the damage he'd caused was already regenerating. "Okay. So that's how it is." The Colossus swung a massive arm at him. "Danger sense," screamed. Izuku twisted away, the attack passing so close he felt the heat sear his costume. Black whip lashed out, wrapping around the Colossus's wrist. Izuku pulled, yanking himself around and behind the creature, then delivered a kick to the back of its knee. The joint buckled slightly. The Colossus stumbled. Then it recovered, spinning faster than something that size should be able to move, and a gout of concentrated flame erupted from its chest. Izuku barely dodged. The fire caught his left arm, burning through the costume and blistering the skin beneath. Pain. Real pain, the kind he'd learned to compartmentalize and ignore. He dropped to 40% to conserve energy, circling the Colossus while it tried to track him. The regular giants were being engaged now, he could hear Hildra's war cry somewhere to his left, the clash of weapons, the screams of the wounded and dying. Focus. One problem at a time. The Colossus launched another fire blast. Izuku used smokescreen to disrupt its vision, then came in from an unexpected angle with a FA gene-enhanced strike to its face. The creature's head snapped back. Chunks of black metal broke away. But they reformed almost instantly. The same regeneration he'd seen in the giant at the village. "You're not killing it." Hildra appeared beside him, wings beating furiously. "It's rebuilding faster than we can damage it." "I noticed." Any suggestions? Hit it harder. Thanks, that's incredibly helpful. The Colossus recovered and swung at both of them. They split apart, dodging in opposite directions, then came back together to attack from two angles simultaneously. It barely mattered. Every wound closed. Every damaged component regrew. They were fighting something that couldn't be beaten through brute force alone. Izuku's mind raced. Regeneration required energy. The fire giants they'd fought before ran out of flame eventually, kill them fast enough, and they couldn't recover. But this thing was bigger, stronger, and clearly had more reserves. Unless... Hildur. Keep it busy for 30 seconds. What are you going to do? Something stupid. He broke away from the fight, dropping to the ground and sprinting toward the breach in the wall. The regular giants were mostly handled, Valkyries and Einherjar had rallied, pushing them back. But the breach itself was still open, and through it, Izuku could see the source of the Colossus's power. A burning sigil on the ground outside the wall. Sinmara's mark, pulsing with flame that flowed directly toward the Colossus like a river of fire. It wasn't regenerating on its own. It was being fed. Izuku changed direction, heading for the sigil. A giant blocked his path. He went through it, Black Whip wrapping around its head and using the momentum to swing himself forward as he destroyed it. Another giant. Another. He wasn't fighting them, just getting past them, reaching the sigil. 20 feet away. 10. 5. He slammed both hands against the burning mark and pushed with everything he had. 70% one for all. Green lightning erupted from his palms, forcing itself into the sigil, disrupting the fire magic, overwhelming it with raw power. Pain screamed through his arms, the same old pain, the breaking strain that he'd lived with for years. The sigil cracked. The fire flow stopped. Behind him, the Colossus stumbled. Its regeneration halted. For the first time since the battle began, it looked vulnerable. Now. Izuku screamed. Hit it now. Hildur didn't need to be told twice. She came at the Colossus like divine lightning, her spear blazing with power she'd been holding in reserve. The weapon pierced the creature's chest, where a heart would be, if it had one, and she twisted, ripping through metal and flame. Other Valkyries joined her. Sif appeared with her sword, hacking at the Colossus's legs. Even Forseti was there, his divine judgment ability stripping away the creature's remaining power. The Colossus fell. It crashed to the ground with an impact that shook the entire eastern quarter, flames guttering, metal cooling. For a moment, silence. Then cheering. Ragged, exhausted, but genuine cheering from the Einherjar and Valkyries. Izuku didn't cheer. He was on his knees beside the shattered sigil, trying to get his breathing under control. His arms were screaming, not broken, but damaged. The 70% burst had pushed past his safe limits. Midoriya. Sif was at his side, her face streaked with soot and blood. I'm fine. He wasn't, but saying so was automatic. The sigil. Sinmara was feeding the Colossus through it. That's how it regenerated so fast. I saw. Sif helped him to his feet, supporting his weight when his legs wobbled. That was brilliant. And incredibly reckless. Story of my life. They surveyed the damage together. The eastern wall was breached in 3 places. Several buildings had burned. Casualties were still being counted, but the number would be significant. But the Colossus was down. The giants were dead or driven off. Asgard still stood. She's testing us, Izuku said quietly. The Colossus, the coordinated attack, the feeding sigil. Sinmara wanted to see what we could handle. What it would take to break us. And now she knows. Now she knows. Izuku looked at the cooling remains of the Colossus. Next time, she won't send one. She'll send 10. 20. And they'll all be fed through sigils like this one. Sif's expression hardened. Then we need to find a way to beat them that doesn't require you nearly killing yourself. I'm open to suggestions. I have one. Freya's voice cut through the aftermath noise. She was walking toward them through the rubble, her dress somehow immaculate despite the chaos around her. But you're not going to like it. What is it? A ritual. Ancient Vanir magic, combined with what you call quirk energy. Freya stopped in front of them, her eyes locked on Izuku. It would amplify your power. Let you access higher percentages without the physical cost. That sounds too good to be true. It is. Freya's expression was unreadable. The ritual requires connection. Deep, personal connection. The kind that doesn't develop in weeks. What kind of connection? Freya didn't answer immediately. She looked at Sif, then at Hildr, who had landed nearby, then back at Izuku. The kind that binds souls together, she said finally. Permanently. Izuku's mouth went dry. I'm talking about an option. Nothing more. Freya turned away. Think about it. Discuss it with the others. When Sinmara comes again, and she will, we need to be ready. She walked away, leaving Izuku standing in the ruins with more questions than answers. The council met that night in the damaged Great Hall. The atmosphere was tense, victory had a price, and everyone knew the next attack would be worse. Freya explained the ritual in more detail. Ancient magic, designed to link multiple people together in a way that allowed power to flow between them. In theory, it could let Izuku access the full extent of One for All without destroying his body, by distributing the strain across multiple connected individuals. In practice, it required trust. Genuine trust, the kind that came from real emotional connection. The ritual couldn't be faked. So you're saying he needs to bond with people? Hildr asked. Like, emotionally? Yes. And physically? That can be part of it. But the emotional component is what matters. Freya's tone was clinical. The ritual reads intention, not action. Surface-level connections won't work. How many connections would be needed? Gondal asked. 3 minimum. More would provide greater stability, greater power distribution. The room was quiet. Everyone understood what was being discussed, even if no one wanted to say it directly. This is absurd, Forseti said finally. We're talking about doing whatever it takes to survive. Sif's voice was steel. You saw what one Colossus did to our defenses. If Sinmara sends more, and she will, we need an answer. And the answer is to let this mortal form emotional bonds with our warriors. Our Valkyries. The answer is to give him the power to protect us. Sif stood, her chair scraping back. I've fought beside Izuku Midoriya. I've watched him save lives, train our soldiers, take wounds meant for others. I trust him. Not because of magic or rituals, but because he's earned it. As have I, Hildr said, rising as well. The Green One fights like a god and bleeds like a mortal. I'd follow him into any battle. He saved my life during the Colossus attack, one of the Einherjar captains added. Threw himself between me and a fire giant's sword. Didn't even hesitate. More voices. More statements of support. Not everyone, Forseti remained silent and hostile, but enough that the sentiment in the room was clear. Izuku felt something tighten in his chest. I didn't ask for any of this. We know, Sif said. That's why it matters. The ritual requires genuine connection, Freya reminded them. This isn't something that can be ordered or commanded. The bonds must form naturally, or they won't form at all. Then let them form naturally. Hildr grinned. I'm not doing anything forced. But if the Green One and I happen to develop a deeper connection through, say, intense sparring and near-death experiences. She shrugged. Who am I to fight destiny? This is highly irregular, Forseti muttered. Everything about this situation is irregular. Gondal closed her notebook. A mortal from another dimension is our best warrior. A Vanir queen is advising us despite her hatred of Asgard. Fire giants are invading under the direction of an entity who should be dead. She looked at Forseti. Perhaps irregular is exactly what we need. The council adjourned without a formal resolution, but the direction was clear. The ritual would remain an option. And in the meantime, connections that had been forming naturally would continue to develop. Whatever that meant. Air found Izuku in the healing quarters 3 hours later. He'd gone to check on the wounded after the council meeting, feeling the need to do something useful rather than sitting around thinking about Freya's proposal. The healers were overwhelmed, too many casualties, not enough hands, and Izuku had ended up helping where he could. Moving patients, fetching supplies, doing the work that didn't require divine magic. You should be resting. Air's voice was quiet, her hands already reaching for his injured arms. The damage you took is less than what they took. Izuku gestured at the rows of wounded Einherjar. I can rest later. You always say that. Air guided him to a side chamber, away from the main healing area. Sit. He sat. He'd learned that arguing with Air was pointless, she had a way of making her requests sound like universal laws. Her hands glowed as she examined his arms. The light was different from Freya's magic, softer, more focused on specific injuries rather than overall restoration. Izuku watched her work, noting the concentration in her expression, the precision of her movements. The damage isn't as bad as I expected, she said finally. You're healing faster than you should be. The sessions with Freya are helping. She's been, surprisingly kind. Freya is many things. Kind isn't usually one of them. Air's hands continued their work. But she sees something in you. Something that reminds her of what she lost. Her son. Yes. Air paused. She told you. Some of it. Not the details. The details are complicated. Air's voice was careful. I was there, during the end. When Kratos killed Baldur. When Freya tried to stop it, even though her son was already lost to her. What happened? Baldur attacked her. Would have killed her. And still she tried to save him. Air's eyes were distant. That's the kind of love she carries. The kind that can't let go, even when letting go is the only mercy left. Izuku was quiet for a moment. And now? Now she's learning to care again. Slowly. Painfully. Air met his eyes. Don't hurt her. I don't intend to. No one ever does. She finished her healing and pulled back. You're lucky, you know. Not many people get to see the real Freya. The woman behind the queen. What about you? Izuku asked. Do you always see the person behind the role? Air smiled slightly, the first smile he'd seen from her. I'm a healer. Seeing people as they really are is my job. And what do you see when you look at me? A man who doesn't know how to stop fighting. She stood, brushing off her robes. A man who gives everything he has and then finds more to give. A man who, she stopped, looking away. Who what? Who makes me want to believe in heroes again. The words came out soft, almost reluctant. I've healed too many warriors who fought for glory, for honor, for vengeance. But you fight because you can't not fight. Because leaving people in danger isn't something you're capable of. Izuku didn't know what to say. Rest, Air said, her professional tone returning. Actual rest. I'll have food sent to your quarters. Air, rest. She was already walking away. That's an order. Izuku watched her go, trying to process what had just happened. Between Freya's healing sessions, Hildra's increasingly intense sparring matches, Sif's quiet support, and now Air's unexpected vulnerability. The connections Freya had mentioned. They were forming. Not because of any ritual or requirement, but because people were choosing to let him in. It was terrifying. And wonderful. And deeply confusing. He went to his quarters and, for once, actually rested. The next morning brought news from Vanaheim. Sinmara had launched a direct assault on Freya's realm. Not a probe this time, a full invasion force, with multiple colossi and thousands of fire giants. Freya had returned in the night to defend her people, leaving only a brief message for the council. "She's splitting us," Sif said grimly. "Attacking Vanaheim forces Freya to choose between helping us and protecting her own realm." "Can the Vanir hold?" Gondal asked. "Unknown. But even if they do, they'll be too damaged to help us when Sinmara turns her attention back to Asgard." The council devolved into urgent planning. Defensive preparations were accelerated. Patrol schedules were doubled. Everyone knew they were on borrowed time. Izuku found Hildra on the training grounds, working through combat forms with an intensity that bordered on violence. "You should be resting too," he said. Says the man who helped heal the wounded instead of sleeping. Hildra didn't stop her movements. "I heard about the fight with the Colossus. About how you broke the sigil at 70%. It was necessary. It was suicidal." She finally paused, turning to face him. "You keep doing that. Pushing past your limits, sacrificing yourself. What happens when you push too far? Then someone else steps up. That's not good enough." Hildra stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her divine skin. "I don't want someone else. I want you. Fighting beside me. Alive." "Hildra, don't." She grabbed the front of his shirt. "Don't give me platitudes about duty and sacrifice. You matter to me, Izuku Midoriya. And I'm not going to watch you destroy yourself while pretending it's noble." She kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was fierce and demanding, a warrior's kiss, taking what she wanted rather than asking for permission. Izuku's brain short-circuited for about 2 seconds. Then he kissed her back. When they finally broke apart, Hildra was grinning. "Better. Now you're fighting for something. I was already, fighting for everyone isn't the same as fighting for someone." She released his shirt but didn't step back. "Remember that. When Sinmara comes, when you're tempted to sacrifice yourself, remember that there are people who need you to survive. Not the hero. You." Izuku's heart was pounding. We should probably talk about this. Later. After we win." Hildra patted his chest. "Right now, we train. And you're going to stop holding back." She moved into a combat stance, spear appearing in her hand. Her grin was challenging, daring. Izuku activated full cowling. The spar that followed was the most intense yet. Hildra wasn't just testing him anymore, she was pushing him to find new limits, new techniques, new ways to fight without destroying himself. Every time he started to burn too hot, she forced him to find a different angle. By the end, they were both exhausted, lying on the training ground watching the sky change colors. 60% sustained, Hildra said. "That's better." It felt different. Izuku was breathing hard. More controlled. Like the power was flowing instead of forcing. That's what happens when you have something to come back to. She turned her head to look at him. "The ritual Freya mentioned. The soul-binding thing." "Yeah. I'm not doing it because of the ritual. I want you to know that. Whatever happens between us, it's real. Not magic." Izuku reached over and took her hand. "I know." They lay there until the stars came out, and for a few hours, the war felt very far away. The trial of worth came 3 days later. Izuku hadn't asked for it, hadn't even known it was being arranged until Gondal informed him that morning. Forseti had invoked an ancient law, the right of any Asgardian to challenge a non-Aesir standing in the realm. If Izuku failed the trial, he would have to leave. He's trying to undermine you, Sif said angrily. He knows he can't beat you in combat, so he's using bureaucracy. Let him try. Izuku was calmer than he felt. What does the trial involve? 3 challenges: combat, wisdom, and sacrifice. Combat proves strength. Wisdom proves mind. Sacrifice proves heart. And if I pass, then you're recognized as worthy to stand among the Aesir. Forseti can never challenge your presence again. Then I pass. The trial of worth was held in the great courtyard, with most of Asgard's surviving population watching. Forseti presided, looking confident. The Valkyries stood as witnesses. Freya had returned from Vanaheim, wounded but victorious, and watched from a high balcony with an unreadable expression. The combat challenge came first. You will face a Valkyrie in single combat, Forseti announced. The fight ends when one combatant yields or cannot continue. No lethal force. Hildra stepped forward, and Izuku felt a flash of surprise. You? They asked for a Valkyrie. I volunteered. Her grin was fierce. Besides, I've been wanting a real match. No holding back this time. Both of us. Both of us. The crowd parted to give them space. Izuku activated full cowling, green lightning crackling. Hildra unfurled her wings, spear blazing with divine fire. They clashed. This fight was nothing like their spars. Hildra came at him with everything: speed that pushed him to 60% just to track, power that forced him to reinforce his blocks with Gene energy, aerial maneuvers that tested the limits of float. Izuku responded in kind. Black Whip extended in multiple directions, creating a web of offensive and defensive options. He mixed smokescreen bursts with sudden direction changes, keeping Hildra off balance even as she adapted to each new tactic. The fight lasted 7 minutes. Neither could gain a decisive advantage. Finally, Hildra dropped low and swept his legs. Izuku fell, rolled, came up, and found her spear point at his throat. But his hand was on her wrist, Black Whip wrapped around her weapon arm, and one surge of power would disarm her before she could strike. Stalemate. I yield, Izuku said. The crowd gasped. Hildra's eyes went wide. What? I could disarm you, but you could also cut me. Neither of us wins clean. He released her wrist and stepped back. A draw that I concede. Forseti looked furious. The trial requires a clear outcome, the trial requires combat, Gondal interrupted. He fought. He yielded when neither could win. That shows both strength and wisdom. Murmurs of agreement from the crowd. Forseti's jaw tightened, but he nodded shortly. The combat challenge is completed. We proceed to wisdom. The wisdom challenge was a strategic scenario, a realm under attack from multiple directions, limited forces, impossible odds. Izuku was given the information and asked to present a defensive plan. He studied the scenario for 30 seconds. Then he started talking. Split your forces into 3 mobile groups rather than static defense. Group 1 draws the eastern attackers toward the narrow canyon here, he pointed at the map, where terrain advantage neutralizes their numbers. Group 2 uses hit-and-run tactics on the northern force, slowing their advance without committing to a pitched battle. Group 3 protects the population center while Groups 1 and 2 whittle down the enemy. That leaves no reserve, Forseti objected. Because the reserve is Group 3. Once the population is evacuated, they become mobile too. You're not defending ground, you're protecting people. Ground can be retaken. People can't. He continued for 10 minutes, laying out contingencies, alternative routes, supply considerations. By the end, even Gondal was nodding with approval. The wisdom challenge is past, Forseti said through gritted teeth. We proceed to sacrifice. The final challenge was the one Izuku had worried about least, because he already knew the answer. What would you sacrifice, Forseti asked, to protect those who are not your people, in a world that is not your home? Izuku thought about the question. Really thought about it. I've already sacrificed everything, he said. My world. My friends. My mentor. My family. Everything I knew is gone, and I might never get it back. The crowd was silent. But I didn't lose those things for Asgard. I lost them in my own fight, my own war. The question is what I'd sacrifice now, for people I've just met, in a conflict that isn't mine. He looked around the courtyard, at Sif, who had trusted him from the beginning. At Hildr, who had challenged him to be better. At Gondel, who saw his worth when others saw a threat. At Air, who had healed more than his body. At Freya, who was learning to care again through him. The answer is, whatever it takes. Not because I'm a hero, or because I'm trying to earn your approval. But because you're people in danger, and I have the power to help. That's all the reason I've ever needed. Silence stretched. Forseti opened his mouth to object, to find some flaw in the answer. He speaks true. Freya's voice carried from the balcony. I can feel no deception in him. No hidden agenda. Just, sincerity. She sounded almost surprised. The kind of sincerity I haven't seen since. She stopped. He passes. The crowd erupted. Cheering, applause, shouts of approval. Forseti looked like he'd swallowed something bitter, but even he couldn't argue with Freya's divine judgment. Gondel stepped forward, raising her hands for silence. By the trial of worth, Izuku Midoriya is recognized as worthy to stand among the Aesir. Let none question his place among us. More cheering. Izuku stood in the center of it all, feeling overwhelmed and grateful and slightly terrified. Then Hildr grabbed him in a fierce hug, lifting him off the ground despite his protests. You magnificent idiot. You yielded. It was the right call. It was dramatic as hell is what it was. She dropped him and kissed him again, in front of everyone, not caring who saw. The crowd's cheering somehow got even louder. That night, Izuku stood on the palace walls, looking out over Asgard. The realm was battered, damaged, still recovering from attacks that would have destroyed any human city. But it was standing. And its people were fighting. Sif found him there, as she often did after major events. You could have beaten her, Sif said. In the combat challenge. You were holding back. Maybe. Izuku didn't deny it. But what would winning have proven? That I could defeat a Valkyrie? They already knew that. The yield showed something different. What? That I know when not to fight. That victory isn't always the goal. He looked at her. Leaders need to know when to step back. When to let someone else have the win. Sif was quiet for a long moment. The Einherjar are calling you Green Thunder now. Did you know that? I've heard. They tell stories about you. About the fire giants you've killed, the Colossus you brought down, the way you helped rebuild the walls yourself rather than just giving orders. She moved closer. Half of them would follow you over Forseti. Over me. I don't want them to follow me. I know. Sif smiled slightly. That's why they would. She reached up and touched his face, a gesture so unexpected that Izuku froze. Her fingers were calloused from centuries of sword work, but gentle. When Sifra first brought you here, she said, I thought you were a complication. A variable I didn't need. But you've proven me wrong, Izuku Midoriya. You've become something essential. Sif, don't. She leaned in and kissed him, softer than Hildr, more controlled, but no less intense. I'm not good at this. At expressing feelings. I'm a warrior. I know how to fight, how to lead, how to die well. But this? She gestured between them. This is new territory. We're both in new territory, Izuku said. I'm from another dimension, remember? Hard to forget, with the green lightning. She smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look younger, less burdened. Promise me something. What? When Sinmara comes. When the real battle begins. Don't sacrifice yourself. Find another way. I'll try. Not good enough. Her grip on his face tightened. Promise me you'll survive. That whatever happens, you'll fight to live. Not just to win. Izuku met her eyes. I promise. Good. She kissed him again, deeper this time. Now come. There's planning to do. And apparently a Valkyrie who's been telling everyone that you're hers. She said that? Among other things. Sif's smile was amused. I told her she'd have to share. Izuku's brain short-circuited again. You told her, come on, Green Thunder. Sif took his hand and led him toward the palace. We have a war to win. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Freya's information about Sinmara's forces proved invaluable. They knew the enemy's numbers now, their capabilities, their likely attack routes. Defensive plans were finalized. Evacuation routes were established. Every Einherjar was trained, every Valkyrie briefed, every possible contingency considered. And the connections continued to deepen. Air started spending more time with Izuku, beyond just healing sessions. She would find him after training, bring him food when he forgot to eat, sit with him during the quiet moments when the weight of everything pressed down hardest. She rarely spoke about her feelings directly, it wasn't her way, but her presence said everything that needed saying. One night, after a particularly brutal training session, she found him alone in the healing quarters, trying to bandage his own injuries. You're doing it wrong, she said, taking the bandages from his hands. I've done this 1,000 times. And you do it wrong every time. She worked efficiently, her hands steady and warm. You always leave the wrappings too loose. Afraid of restricting movement? Something like that. Movement doesn't matter if the wound reopens. She finished the bandaging and didn't let go of his hand. Izuku. He waited. The ritual Freya mentioned. The Soulbinding. Air's voice was barely above a whisper. I've been thinking about it. And I don't know what I feel. I don't know if it's real, or if it's just proximity and stress and the end of the world looming. She looked up at him. But I know I don't want you to die. I know that when you're hurt, something in me hurts too. I know that watching you give everything, every single day, makes me want to give something back. Air, I'm not saying this because of the ritual. I'm saying it despite the ritual. Because I need you to know, before whatever comes next, that you matter to me. Not the hero. Not the warrior. You. Izuku didn't know what to say. So he did what felt right instead, he pulled her close and held her, letting her feel his heartbeat, his warmth, his presence. They stayed like that for a long time. Forseti came to him the night before the battle. Not to challenge him this time, his expression was different. Less hostile. More conflicted. You passed the trial, Forseti said. By the old laws, you're one of us now. I know. I still don't like you. I know that too. Forseti was silent for a moment. But you were right. About fighting for people rather than ground. About knowing when to step back. He looked away. My grandfather was Baldur. Did you know that? I'd heard. He was good. Everyone says so. Kind, compassionate, beloved by all. Forseti's jaw tightened. I never met him. He died before I was born, killed by the ghost Kratos. But I grew up hearing about him, about his goodness, about how different he was from Odin. And you wanted to be like him? I wanted to be worthy of his legacy. Forseti's voice was bitter. But I'm not good. I'm ambitious, and jealous, and I use laws as weapons instead of principles. When you arrived, all I saw was a threat to my authority. Not a person. A variable to be eliminated. And now? Now I see someone who's actually good. Who helps without calculating advantage. Who fights without seeking glory. Forseti met his eyes. I hate you for it. And I respect you for it. And when Sinmara comes, I'll fight beside you. Izuku nodded slowly. That's all I ask. One more thing. Forseti hesitated. The sigil you broke during the Colossus attack. The way you disrupted it. I have an ability, judgment, they call it. I can see the truth of things, the weight of actions. During the battle, I could feel the wrongness of that sigil. And I think I could help you break more of them. You're offering to fight with me. Directly. I'm offering to do my part. Forseti's expression was complicated. You've shown me what leadership can look like. What it looks like when someone earns authority rather than claiming it. I'm not going to become you, I don't have that in me. But I can be better than I was. That's all any of us can do. Forseti nodded once, sharply. Then he turned and walked away. Izuku watched him go, feeling something shift in his understanding of the man. Not a friend, maybe never that. But no longer an enemy. Progress. The morning of the final battle arrived with false calm. Clear skies. Light wind. The kind of beautiful day that seemed mockery given what was coming. Izuku stood on the walls with Sif, Hildr, and the other leaders, watching the horizon. They'd received reports an hour ago, Sinmara's forces were moving. Multiple columns, converging on Asgard from 3 directions. Thousands of fire giants. Multiple colossi. And Sinmara herself, finally manifesting in full. This is it, Sif said. Everything we've prepared for. We're ready, Izuku replied. As ready as we can be. The Valkyries are in position, Hildr reported. All squads briefed and equipped. They'll hit the flanking columns while the Einherjar hold the center. Freya. Leading the Vanir contingent. They'll target the Colossi power sigils while we keep the giants busy. Forseti. With his judgment squad. They'll identify and disrupt any magical support structures. Everything in place. Every contingency considered. All that remained was the fighting. Izuku. Sif turned to face him directly. Whatever happens today, don't. He shook his head. No goodbyes. We fight, we win, and then we have whatever conversations we need to have. Together. Sif smiled. You really are an optimist. Worst character flaw. He smiled back. But it's kept me alive this long. The first fire giants appeared on the horizon. They came in waves, a tide of flame and fury that crashed against Asgard's defenses. The battle began with the clash of steel and fire, with screams and war cries, with the kind of violence that decided the fates of worlds. Izuku threw himself into the fighting with everything he had. Full cowling at 50%, stable and controlled. Black whip tendrils striking in multiple directions. Float keeping him mobile, unpredictable. Each giant that fell meant one less threat to the people behind the walls. The hours blurred together. Fighting, moving, fighting again. The Valkyries swept across the battlefield in coordinated strikes. Einherjar held the line with shields and spears. Freya's Vanir magic erupted against Colossi, breaking the power sigils that let them regenerate. And Sinmara watched from the rear of her army, waiting. She's measuring us, Gondal said during a brief lull. Seeing how we respond, where our weaknesses are. Then let's show her strength instead. Izuku looked at the battlefield. We need to push. Take the fight to her before she's ready. That's suicide. That's opportunity. He turned to the assembled warriors. Who's with me? Sif stepped forward. Then Hildr. Then, surprisingly, Forseti. One by one, the leaders of Asgard's defense volunteered for the desperate push. For Asgard, Sif said. For survival, Hildr added. For people we care about, Izuku finished. Let's end this. They charged. Chapter 3, All the gods in heaven. Izuku's fist connected with a fire giant's jaw and sent the creature spinning into 3 of its companions. He didn't stop to watch them fall. Float carried him sideways as a gout of flame scorched the air where he'd been standing. The push toward Sinmara's position had turned into a running battle across 2 miles of broken terrain. Fire giants came in endless waves, throwing themselves at the advancing Asgardian force with a fury that felt personal. They weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to buy their queen time. Left. Hildr screamed from above. Izuku dove left. A Colossus arm smashed into the ground behind him, cratering the earth. He rolled to his feet and hit the construct's knee joint with a Fa gene-charged kick that buckled the metal. The Colossus stumbled. Hildr descended on it from above, her spear punching through its shoulder joint and ripping out cables of molten metal. 2 more Valkyries joined her, warriors whose names Izuku had learned over the past weeks, faces he could now match to fighting styles and personalities. Sigils on its left hip. Izuku shouted, pointing. He'd learned to spot them fast. Sinmara's feeding marks always pulsed with a rhythm slightly out of sync with the Colossus's movements. Forseti was there before anyone else reached it. His judgment power flared, a golden light that cut through the fire and smoke, and he slammed his palm against the sigil. I judge this bond false, he roared. I judge this chain broken. The sigil cracked. Shattered. The Colossus's regeneration stopped dead, and its flames dimmed from blinding white to a sickly orange. The Valkyries tore it apart in seconds. That's 3 down. Gondal's voice crackled through the communication rune Freya had enchanted for them. 2 more Colossi on the eastern flank, and at least 50 giants between you and Sinmara's position. Freya. Izuku called back, pressing the rune at his collar. Handling the Vanaheim rift. Sinmara opened a secondary portal behind our lines. I've almost sealed it, but I can't leave until it's done. Do what you need to do. We'll push forward. Izuku turned to Sif, who was cleaning black blood off her sword with practiced efficiency. Her armor was dented and scorched, her hair wild, her expression absolutely focused. Can we break through? He asked. Through 50 fire giants and 2 colossi. Sif assessed the field ahead. Burning terrain. Broken rocks providing cover. The enemy massed between them and the dark shape of Sinmara, visible now as a pillar of black fire on the horizon. Not with brute force. Not without losing most of our people. Then we don't use brute force. Izuku turned to the combined force behind them, 30 Einherjar, 8 Valkyries, Forseti and his squad. Battered but still fighting. New plan. Valkyries take the air, draw the Colossi's attention, keep them looking up. Einherjar advance in shield formation, slow and steady, forcing the giants to engage on our terms. Forseti, your squad breaks any sigils the Valkyries expose. And you? Sif asked. I go straight through the middle. Alone. Fast. Before they can react. While everyone else has their attention. Izuku met her eyes. I'm the only one who can get to Sinmara before she's ready for me. Sif stopped herself. She'd promised not to call his plans suicidal anymore. Fine. But you don't engage her alone. You get close, you hold position, and you wait for us. Deal. Swear it. I swear. Sif held his gaze for a long moment. Then she kissed him, quick, hard, a warrior's goodbye that refused to be a goodbye. Don't make me a widow before I'm even a wife. Was that a proposal? Move. The plan went into action. 8 Valkyries surged skyward, wings catching the thermal updrafts from the burning field. Hildra led them in a screaming dive at the nearest Colossus, and the massive construct raised its arms to swat them from the sky. Exactly as planned, its attention was up when it needed to be forward. The Einherjar advanced in tight formation, shields locked, moving across the broken ground in a disciplined wall of steel and determination. Fire giants turned to face them, and the two forces collided with a crash that shook the earth. Izuku waited 3 seconds. Counted the enemy positions. Mapped his route. Then he went to 70% and ran. The world blurred. He crossed the first 100 yards before any giant could react, weaving between burning debris and leaping over craters. A giant stepped into his path. Black Whip grabbed its arm and used its own mass to slingshot himself forward faster. Another reached for him, he went under its legs without slowing, a trail of green lightning marking his passage. 50 giants. He wasn't fighting them. Wasn't even trying. Just moving, dodging, flowing through the gaps in their formation like water through rocks. A Colossus swung at him. He used float to launch himself over the arm, ran along its forearm, and jumped off its shoulder. The creature was still turning to track him when he hit the ground on the other side and kept going. The burning field gave way to scorched black stone. The air was hot, dangerously hot, the kind of heat that would kill a normal person in minutes. Izuku could feel his costume beginning to char at the edges. And ahead of him, Sinmara waited. She wasn't what he expected. He'd imagined something monstrous, a towering creature of mindless flame and destruction. What he found instead was almost human in shape, maybe 9 feet tall, composed of fire so dark it looked like flowing obsidian. Her features were sharp and angular, beautiful in a way that made his eyes water from the heat. Her hair was streams of white flame that defied gravity, cascading upward like inverted waterfalls. She was standing at the center of a massive sigil burned into the black stone, a pattern of interconnected circles and lines that pulsed with power. This was her anchor point, the place where she'd manifested fully into this realm. And she was looking directly at him. The mortal. Her voice resonated in the air itself, bypassing his ears and speaking directly to something deeper. I've been watching you, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku skidded to a stop 30 feet from her position. Full cowling crackled around him, and he could feel the strain. 70% for a sustained sprint had cost him. His arms ached. His heart hammered. You know my name. I know many things. Through my giants, through my sigils, through the fires that burn across the 9 realms. Sinmara didn't move from her position. I've watched you fight. I've measured your power. I've calculated your limits. Then you know I'm not going to let you destroy these realms. Destroy. Sinmara's expression shifted, something that might have been surprise, might have been amusement. You misunderstand me. I don't wish to destroy anything. I wish to complete what was begun. Ragnarok. Ragnarok was a promise. A covenant between the forces of creation and destruction. Everything ends, everything begins again, pure, clean, unburdened by the mistakes of what came before. Her dark flames pulsed. Ragnarok was supposed to be that ending. Total. Complete. But it failed. Things survived. Broken things, wounded things, things that should have been allowed to rest. People survived, Izuku corrected. Living, breathing people who chose to keep going. They chose to suffer. Sinmara's voice was almost gentle. Look at them, mortal. Look at your precious Asgard. A ruin populated by ghosts, pretending to rebuild while the foundations crumble beneath them. Look at Freya, a queen without a kingdom, a mother without a son, carrying grief so heavy it's crushing her. Look at Sif, a warrior with nothing left to protect, fighting because she's forgotten how to do anything else. You're wrong. Am I? Sinmara extended a hand, and flames danced across her fingers. I can offer them mercy. An end to suffering. A clean slate, where the next age can begin without the scars of this one. That's not your decision to make. Isn't it? I am the flame that cleanses. The fire that purifies. I exist to end what has grown corrupt, to burn away the dead would so new growth can, no. The word came out flat and absolute. No anger, no defiance, no dramatic conviction. Just a simple negation of everything she represented. You don't get to decide who suffers too much to deserve living. You don't get to look at people in pain and say they'd be better off dead. That's not mercy. That's just murder with better branding. Sinmara's expression hardened. You're very young to be so certain. I've been told that too. Izuku dropped into a combat stance. I promised Sif I wouldn't engage you alone. But I'm not going to stand here and listen to you justify genocide. Then don't listen. Sinmara raised her hands, and the sigil beneath her flared to life. Burn. The ground erupted. Fire geysers burst from the stone in a ring around them, cutting off retreat. The heat spike was instant and enormous. Izuku felt his costume's outer layer melt in patches. The air itself seemed to ignite, turning the space between them into an inferno. Izuku moved first. 70% full cowling, pushing through the heat, black whip tendrils lashing out to grab chunks of rock for momentum assists. He closed the distance to Sinmara in a heartbeat, fist cocked for a strike that would have leveled a building. She caught his fist. Not blocked, caught. Her hand closed around his knuckles, dark flame wrapping his skin. The pain was extraordinary, not just heat but something deeper, fire that reached past flesh into the energy beneath. Strong, she acknowledged. But strength alone won't. Izuku's other fist hit her in the chest. Fa gene charged, the stored energy releasing in a single devastating burst. The impact sent shockwaves outward, scattering the fire geysers and cracking the stone beneath them. Sinmara staggered backward, releasing his hand. Her torso showed a fractured pattern where his blow had landed, obsidian flames cracked and dimmed. Then the cracks sealed. The flames rebuilt. She straightened, and her expression had changed from calm certainty to something more predatory. Ah, she said. That hurt. She hit him. Not a punch, an explosion of force centered on her palm, a blast wave of concentrated fire that caught Izuku in the chest and sent him flying backward through the air. He hit the ground 40 feet away, bouncing once, twice, leaving craters in the stone. Danger sense screamed. He rolled sideways as a column of dark fire smashed down where he'd been lying. The stone where it hit didn't just burn, it ceased to exist, leaving a perfectly circular hole that seemed to go down forever. Izuku got to his feet, tasting blood. His costume was half gone now, the reinforced fabric no match for primordial flame. Burns covered his arms and chest, and something felt cracked in his ribs. Sinmara was walking toward him. Not rushing, walking. Each step left burning footprints in the stone. Your power is impressive, she said. For a mortal, for a god, for anything born in this age. But you're fighting the fundamental force of endings. You cannot defeat entropy. You cannot outrun the heat death of purpose. Watch me. He went to 80%. Green lightning erupted from him in a corona that pushed back the surrounding flames. His muscles screamed in protest, he'd never held 80% for more than a few seconds. His bones vibrated with the strain. But he was faster now. Stronger. When he hit Sinmara, it mattered. Black whip tendrils lashed out from 6 points simultaneously, not to grab her, but to tear up chunks of stone and hurl them. A distraction. While she batted them aside, Izuku came in low, driving a rising uppercut into her chin. Her head snapped back. Obsidian flames cracked across her face. Before she could recover, he spun and delivered a roundhouse kick to her ribs that sent her sliding across the stone. He followed up. Didn't let her breathe. Punches, kicks, black whip-assisted momentum changes, a barrage of attacks that kept her off balance and prevented her from setting for another blast. But 80% was burning through his reserves fast. His arms were starting to show the familiar spiderweb pattern of stress fractures. Each blow cost him something he couldn't get back. Sinmara knew it. She could see him slowing, feel his strikes losing that razor edge. She stopped retreating and started absorbing his hits, letting them damage her, knowing she could regenerate faster than he could keep attacking. "You're dying," she said between impacts. "Every blow costs you more than it costs me. In a minute, maybe two, you'll be too broken to fight." And then, Izuku grabbed her face with both hands, Black Whip binding her arms, and headbutt her as hard as he could. Her head rocked back. His vision went white with pain. But for 1 second, she was stunned, truly stunned, her regeneration paused, her concentration broken. "Sif!" he screamed across the communication rune. Now! They came from every direction. Sif burst through the ring of fire geysers first, her sword blazing with runes that Freya had inscribed on the blade. She hit Sinmara from the left, the enchanted weapon biting into the entity's flank and actually staying there, preventing regeneration around the wound. Hildra dropped from the sky like a comet, her spear driving into Sinmara's shoulder. The Valkyrie's wings flared as she twisted the weapon, ripping through dark flame and obsidian flesh. 2 more Valkyries struck from behind. Einherjar rushed forward with enchanted weapons, each one targeting a different part of the entity. The coordinated assault turned Sinmara's advantage into chaos. She couldn't regenerate when every wound was being sustained by a different weapon. Sinmara screamed. The sound was beyond hearing, a frequency that shook the ground and cracked the sky. Fire erupted from her in a dome of destruction that threw everyone backward. Izuku hit the ground hard but was already moving. Smokescreen erupted from his body, filling the area with dark cover. Through the smoke, he heard Sinmara roaring, heard the clash of weapons and the cries of warriors. "Forseti," he gasped into the rune. "The main sigil. Under her feet. You need to break it. I can see it." Forseti's voice was strained. "But I can't get close enough, there's a wall of flame around the entire pattern. Then I'll make you a path." Izuku gathered himself. His body was wrecked, both arms showed stress fractures, his ribs were definitely cracked, and the burns on his torso were severe. Any sensible person would have stayed down. 45%. All he could safely manage now. He charged back into the fight. Not toward Sinmara this time, toward the sigil on the ground. The massive anchor pattern that connected her to Muspelheim, that let her maintain her form in this realm. Fire giants converged on him. 5 of them, drawn to the sigil's defense. Izuku went through them with brutal efficiency, Black Whip to trip the first, a kick to shatter the second's knee, a punch that removed the third from the fight entirely. The 4th and 5th came together, he grabbed them both with Black Whip and smashed them into each other. The sigil lay ahead, pulsing with dark power. Flames surrounded it, rising from the carved lines in the stone. Izuku ran straight into the fire. It hurt. God, it hurt. Every nerve ending screamed as the flames licked his skin, charring what remained of his costume and blistering the flesh beneath. He could smell his own hair burning. But he reached the sigil's edge. And he slammed both hands down on the burning stone, channeling one for all directly into the pattern. Forseti. Now. Golden light blazed from across the battlefield. Forseti was running, his own squad protecting his flanks, his judgment power blazing like a beacon. He reached the sigil's perimeter, and the flames that should have stopped him parted, Izuku's power disrupting them just enough to create a gap. Forseti fell to his knees beside Izuku, placed his hands on the stone, and spoke with the full authority of his divine lineage. "I am Forseti, grandson of Baldur, son of judgment and law. I see this bond for what it is, a chain forged in defiance of the natural order. Ragnarok ended. The realms chose to continue. This is the truth. His judgment power sank into the sigil, finding its core, reading its essence. And what he found was exactly what Izuku had suspected: the sigil wasn't just an anchor. It was a denial. Sinmara's refusal to accept that Ragnarok had ended, that the realms had chosen survival over obliteration. I judge this bond severed. The sigil cracked. Not just cracked, shattered. Lines of fracture spread from Forsetti's hands through the entire pattern, splitting apart the carefully carved channels, breaking the connections to Muspelheim. Sinmara felt it instantly. Her scream changed from rage to something closer to anguish. Her form flickered, dark flames guttering, obsidian flesh crumbling at the edges. No. She threw off Sif, Hildr, and the other warriors with a pulse of desperate power. You don't understand. If the realms continue, broken and wounded and suffering, they'll just create more pain. More loss. More grief. Ragnarok was supposed to end it. Pain ends when we choose to heal it. Izuku shouted back, still on his knees, still channeling power into the broken sigil. Not when someone burns it away. You can't heal what's fundamentally broken. Watch us. Freya arrived. She came through the air on wings of magic that hadn't existed in centuries, Vanir power in its purest form, nature and growth and life itself given flight. She'd sealed the secondary rift, rallied the Vanir defenders, and crossed the distance to the battle at speeds that rivaled Izuku's best. She hit Sinmara with everything she had. Not fire against fire. Not force against force. Vanir magic was about life, growth, renewal, the opposite of what Sinmara represented. Where the fire entity burned, Freya healed. Where Sinmara destroyed, Freya created. Vines of pure magical energy erupted from the ground, wrapping around Sinmara's legs, cooling the flames they touched. Crystal formations grew from the stone, channeling Freya's power into a lattice that dampened the heat. The air itself changed, from scorching to merely warm, from lethal to survivable. Sinmara thrashed against the growing bonds. Vanir witch. You of all beings should understand. You know what it means to lose everything. You know the mercy of endings. I do. Freya's voice was steady, her hands moving in complex patterns that wove more and more restraints around the entity. I lost my son. I lost my purpose. I lost every reason to continue. She paused, her eyes finding Izuku across the battlefield. And then I found new ones. Sinmara's struggles weakened. The broken sigil was draining her, without the connection to Muspelheim, she was running on whatever power she'd accumulated, and that was finite. It won't last, Sinmara gasped. Whatever you build, whatever you save, it will all burn eventually. Everything ends. Everything. Maybe. Izuku forced himself to his feet, every muscle protesting. He was running on willpower now. His body had given everything it had. But not today. He looked at Sif, who was bleeding from a dozen wounds but standing firm. At Hildr, who had lost a wing guard and half her spear but was still ready to fight. At Air, who had somehow reached the battlefield and was already healing fallen warriors, her gentle magic a counterpoint to the violence around her. At Gondel, who was coordinating from the rear, her voice steady through the communication runes. At Forsetti, kneeling beside the broken sigil, golden light still flowing from his hands. At Freya, whose magic held a primordial entity in chains of living growth. Not today, he repeated. He reached for something he'd never accessed before. Not a percentage. Not a technique. Something beyond the numbers and the calculations and the careful management of his quirk. One for all wasn't just power passed from one person to the next. It was connection. Bonds between people who chose to carry each other forward. Every user had given something of themselves to the next, their strength, their will, their belief that the future could be better than the past. Izuku had 8 generations of that belief inside him. And now, in this moment, he had something the previous users never did. People who believed in him. Not in One for All. Not in the power. In Izuku Midoriya, the kid from Yuzurifu who broke his bones and got back up, who cried when he was scared and fought anyway, who loved too easily and forgave too quickly and never, ever gave up. 100%. Full cowling erupted from him in a pillar of green energy that lit up the sky. Every quirk activated simultaneously, Black Whip extending in a dozen tendrils, float lifting him off the ground, smokescreen swirling around him, danger sense expanding his awareness to encompass the entire battlefield, FA gene releasing every stored joule of energy in a single devastating charge. And something else. Something new. The realm responded. Forseti had judged him worthy. The trial of worth had been passed. And Asgard, the realm itself, the ancient power that had sustained gods for millennia, recognized his claim. Golden energy mixed with green. The ground beneath him hummed with frequencies that predated language. The air crackled with power that wasn't his but was being given to him, freely, by a realm that had chosen its protector. Sinmara saw it. Her eyes widened, the first genuine fear he'd seen from her. Impossible. You're mortal. The realm can't, the realm doesn't care what I am. Izuku's voice resonated with harmonics that weren't entirely human. It cares what I do. He crossed the distance to Sinmara in a single step that broke the sound barrier. His fist connected with her chest, not just physical force, but the combined power of One for All at maximum output and Asgard's ancient defensive magic, channeled through a body that should have shattered from the strain but held together through pure, stubborn refusal to break. The impact created a column of green-gold energy that rose from the battlefield to the sky, visible across every realm in the 9 worlds. In Midgard, people looked up and saw a pillar of light on the horizon. In Vanaheim, Vanir warriors paused in their own battles to stare. In Alfheim, Hildra's Valkyrie squadrons saw the sky change color and knew. Sinmara came apart. Not destroyed, she was too fundamental for that, too deeply woven into the fabric of reality. But broken. Scattered. Her obsidian form fractured into a million burning fragments that flew outward from the point of impact, each one dimming as it traveled, cooling from white to orange to red to nothing. Her consciousness survived, Izuku could feel it, a fading whisper of conviction that what she'd done was right, that ending was mercy, that fire was purification. You're wrong, he told that fading whisper. But I hope you find peace. The fragments scattered across the realms, too small and cold to threaten anything. Sinmara would reconstitute eventually, in centuries, maybe millennia. But her sigils were broken, her army was shattered, and her anchor to the realms was destroyed. It was over. Izuku dropped from 100% to 0 in an instant. The green-gold light vanished. Asgard's energy withdrew, leaving him standing on ordinary stone with an ordinary body that had been pushed far, far past its limits. His legs gave out first. Then his arms. Then his vision went gray at the edges, and the last thing he saw before darkness took him was Sif running toward him, her face a mask of fear and determination. He hit the ground and felt nothing at all. Voices. Distant at first, then closer. Stabilized, but the damage is extensive. Both arms, multiple ribs, stress fractures in his legs. The burns alone would have killed a normal person. He's not a normal person. That was Sif. Obviously. But he is mortal. And mortal bodies have limits. Can you heal him? Hildra. Her voice was rough, like she'd been shouting. Or crying. I'm doing everything I can. Air. Calm, professional, but with an undercurrent of tension. Freya's been helping. Between the two of us, we've repaired the worst of the damage. But he needs time. How much time? I don't know. Days. Maybe longer. Silence. Then Sif again, quieter, he promised he'd survive. And he did. Air's voice softened. He's alive, Sif. Broken, burned, unconscious, but alive. That's more than anyone had a right to expect after what he did. More silence. Izuku tried to open his eyes, tried to move, tried to speak. His body refused every command. He drifted back into darkness. The next time he surfaced, the voices were different. The fire giant remnants are retreating across all realms. Gondal, reporting. Without Sinmara's coordination, they're reverting to tribal behavior. Still dangerous, but manageable. The Colossi? Sif asked. All destroyed or deactivated. Without the feeding sigils, they collapsed. We're salvaging the metal for reconstruction. Casualties? A pause. 47 Einherjar. 3 Valkyries. 12 Vanir. And, significant civilian casualties in the outer settlements that were hit during the initial wave. Sif exhaled slowly. Too many. Far fewer than it would have been without him. Forseti's voice, surprisingly. Without his plan. Without his sacrifice. Another pause. Then Sif, how are you, Forseti? Exhausted. The judgment power took more out of me than I expected. But I'll recover. He hesitated. The realm responded to him, Sif. I judged him worthy, and Asgard itself gave him power. In all our histories, that's only happened to Odin. At the very beginning. Yes. He's not Odin. No. He's better. The word seemed to surprise Forseti as much as anyone. Odin took the realm's power and used it to build a throne. Midoriya used it to save people and then passed out on the ground. That's what leadership should look like. Izuku wanted to laugh at that. The mighty Izuku Midoriya, realm chosen of Asgard, lying unconscious in what he assumed was a bed, unable to move his own fingers. Some leader. He drifted away again. The third time, he managed to open his eyes. Dim light. Stone ceiling. The smell of healing herbs and something that might have been incense. His body felt like it had been taken apart, reassembled wrong, and then fixed by someone with more enthusiasm than precision. Sif was sitting beside his bed, sharpening her sword. The rhythmic scrape of stone against steel was oddly comforting, a sound he associated with her, with safety, with stubborn determination. Hey, he croaked. Sif's head snapped up. The whetstone clattered to the floor. Her sword followed it a moment later as she leaned forward, her hands finding his face. You're awake. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. You complete and absolute idiot. You promised you wouldn't sacrifice yourself. Didn't sacrifice. Just pushed really hard. You went to 100%. Air said every bone in your arms has fracture lines. Your ribs are held together with Freya's magic. You have burns that, she stopped. Closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were bright with moisture she was clearly trying to will away. 3 days, Izuku. You've been unconscious for 3 days. 3 days. He tried to sit up. Pain immediately convinced him that was a terrible idea. The battle, Sinmara, defeated. Scattered. Gone. Sif pushed him gently back down. We won. The realms are safe. You did it. We did it. He corrected her automatically. All of us. Sif stared at him. Then she laughed, a real laugh, the kind he'd rarely heard from her. Even half dead, you're correcting me. It's important. I couldn't have beaten her alone. Forseti breaking the sigil, Freya's magic, Hildur and the Valkyries attacking together, I know. I was there. Sif picked up her sword and whetstone, settling back into her chair. The others are nearby. Hildra's been pacing outside like a caged animal. Air hasn't left the healing quarters since you were brought in. Gondal keeps coming to check your vital readings and then pretending she was just passing through. And Freya? She's... Sif paused, choosing her words. She's been different. Since the battle. Since she felt Asgard's power flow through you. Another pause. She healed you for 12 hours straight after you collapsed. Used magic she told me she'd sworn never to use again, the kind that costs the healer as much as it gives the patient. Izuku processed this. Is she okay? She's Freya. She'll never admit she's not. Sif resumed sharpening her sword. But yes. She's okay. She's lighter, somehow. Like something she'd been carrying for a long time finally got set down. Movement at the door. Hildra stepped in, saw Izuku's eyes open, and froze. About damn time, she said, her voice rough. She crossed the room in 3 strides and punched his shoulder. Not hard, by Valkyrie standards, it was practically gentle, but enough to make him wince. Ow. That's for scaring me. She punched his other shoulder. That's for going to 100%. She leaned down and kissed him. And that's for winning. I'm sensing mixed messages here. Get used to it. Hildra dropped onto the edge of his bed, her weight making the frame creak. She was still in her armor, battered and scorched from the battle. I haven't slept since you went down. Wanted to be here when you woke up. You've been awake for 3 days. Valkyries don't need much sleep. She said it casually, but the dark circles under her eyes told a different story. Hildra. Don't do the thing where you worry about everyone else while you're lying in a healing bed. Just, let us take care of you for once. More footsteps. Air entered, carrying a tray of supplies. She took one look at Izuku's open eyes, set the tray down with excessive care, and walked to his bedside. You, she said, are the most frustrating patient I have ever treated in 400 years of healing. Only 400? I look young for my age. She placed her hands on his chest, light flowing from her palms. The bone fractures are mending well. Freya's magic stabilized the worst of the tissue damage. But your energy pathways, the channels that your power flows through, are severely strained. You need weeks of recovery before you should even think about using your quirk. Weeks? At minimum. Air's expression brooked no argument. And if I catch you trying to train, help with construction, or do anything more strenuous than walking to the dining hall, I will sedate you. Understood? She's not kidding, Hildra said. She sedated Forseti when he tried to leave his bed early. Forseti was injured. The judgment power took a lot out of him. He's recovering in the next wing. Air finished her examination and pulled back. He's been asking about you, actually. Wanted to know if you survived. That's surprisingly nice of him. Don't get used to it. He also said, and I quote, if that mortal dies before I get a chance to properly thank him, I'll be very annoyed. Izuku laughed, and immediately regretted it as his ribs protested. Sounds about right. Gondal appeared next, trying to look casual and failing completely. She had her notebook, of course, and immediately began asking questions about his condition, his quirk's recovery timeline, and the strategic implications of the realm's power response. You accessed Asgard's defensive magic, she said, pen poised. That's unprecedented for a non-divine entity. The power output during your final attack registered on every magical sensor in the 9 realms. I need to understand how it happened, what the limitations are, and whether it can be replicated. Gondal, Sif said tiredly. He just woke up. And his cognitive function appears normal, so there's no reason we can't begin documenting, Gondal. Fine. She closed her notebook with visible reluctance. Later, then. She sat down in a chair near the foot of the bed, opened the notebook again, and began writing silently. Izuku looked at the women gathered around his bed. Sif, sharpening her sword. Hild, sitting on the edge of the bed with her hand resting on his leg. Checking his bandages. Gondel, taking notes. The only one missing was, "Don't everyone make a fuss." Freya stood in the doorway. She looked different from the last time Izuku had seen her, softer, somehow. Her dress was simpler, her hair loose rather than styled. And her eyes, those ancient eyes that had carried so much pain for so long, looked, not healed. Not happy. But present. Here, in this moment, rather than lost in memories of the past. Freya. Izuku tried to sit up again and was pushed down by 4 pairs of hands simultaneously. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're alive, which is significantly different from fine." She crossed the room, her steps slow and deliberate. The other women shifted to make space, and she sat on the edge of the bed opposite Hilda. "Don't ever do that again," she said. "No promises." "I know." Something flickered in her expression, frustration, affection, and an emotion he couldn't name all tangled together. "You'll do exactly what you did, as many times as necessary, because that's who you are. And I'll heal you every time, because apparently that's who I've become. You didn't have to. The 12 hours, Sif told me, I know what I did." Freya's voice was quiet. "I chose to do it. Not because of a ritual, or a prophecy, or any obligation. Because you were dying, and I wasn't going to let that happen." The room was very still. "I swore to myself," Freya continued, "after Baldur, after everything, that I would never let myself care about someone enough to lose them again. I would be the queen. The goddess. The weapon. But never the woman who loved and lost." She looked at her hands. "Then you appeared. This mortal boy from another world, fighting giants with his bare fists, making speeches about helping people in danger. And I thought you were naive. Foolish. Doomed. I get that a lot. And then you kept doing it. Kept fighting. Kept caring. Kept giving everything, not because anyone asked, but because you couldn't imagine doing anything else." She met his eyes. "And somewhere in there, I realized I was doing the same thing. Caring again. Feeling again. Not because I chose to, but because you made it impossible not to." Silence. Even Gondel had stopped writing. "I'm terrified," Freya whispered. "I'm terrified that this will end the way it always ends. That caring about you will destroy you, the way it destroyed Baldur." Izuku reached for her hand. His arms screamed in protest, stress fractures, muscle damage, the whole catalogue of self-inflicted injury. He didn't care. "You didn't destroy Baldur," he said. "You loved him too much and made a mistake. There's a difference. The result was the same. The intent wasn't. And I'm not Baldur." He squeezed her hand, feeling her fingers tighten around his. "I'm hard to destroy. Ask the fire giants." Freya looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something he'd never seen from her, she laughed. A real laugh, warm and surprised and slightly broken. "You're impossible," she said. "Probably." He grinned. "But I'm alive. And I'm not going anywhere." Freya took his hand in both of hers, and for the first time since her son's death, she let herself hold on without being afraid of the holding. Recovery was slow. Wasn't kidding about the weeks. Izuku spent the first 4 days in bed, drifting in and out of sleep, eating whatever food was brought to him, and enduring a rotating schedule of visitors that seemed to have been organized by someone who understood that leaving him alone for more than 20 minutes would result in him attempting to get up and do something stupid. They weren't wrong. On day 2, he tried to sneak out to check on the reconstruction efforts. He made it to the hallway before Hildra appeared, picked him up like he weighed nothing, and carried him back to bed. "I can walk," he protested. You can barely stand. Those are different things. Stay in bed or I'll sit on you. She dropped him onto the mattress. I'm serious. He stayed in bed. On day 3, Forseti visited. The Aesir prince looked better than Izuku expected, tired but intact, his golden judgment power visible as a faint shimmer around his hands. I owe you an apology, Forseti said without preamble. Multiple apologies, actually. For questioning your presence. For using law as a weapon against you. For being too proud to see what was obvious to everyone else. You don't owe me anything. I do. Forseti sat in the chair beside the bed, his posture straight despite his fatigue. During the battle, when you called for me to break the sigil, you trusted me. Despite everything I'd done to undermine you, you trusted me with the most important part of the plan. You were the right person for the job. That's what I mean. Forseti's jaw tightened. You didn't hold grudges. Didn't calculate political advantage. You just used whatever tool would work best, and you didn't care about the tool's opinion of you. He shook his head. I spent my entire life trying to earn authority through lineage and law. You earned it through action, and it took me nearly losing everything to understand the difference. Forseti, let me finish. The prince leaned forward. I'm not going to become your friend. I'm too proud for that, and too honest to pretend otherwise. But I respect you, Izuku Midoriya. And I will serve as your advisor if you'll have me. Izuku blinked. My advisor? The realm chose you. The power of Asgard itself flowed through you during the battle. That hasn't happened since Odin first claimed the throne. Forseti's expression was serious. Like it or not, you're Asgard's protector now. And protectors need advisors who aren't afraid to tell them when they're wrong. You'd be good at that. I'd be excellent at that. The ghost of a smile crossed Forseti's face. So? Yeah. Izuku nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. Forseti stood, nodded sharply, and left. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, he said without turning around, my grandfather would have liked you. Baldur always valued the genuine over the powerful. Then he was gone. By day 5, Izuku could walk. By day 7, he could move without wincing. By day 10, Air grudgingly allowed him to leave the healing quarters for short periods, accompanied by at least one person at all times. Asgard was rebuilding. Again. But this time, there was energy behind it, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. The battle with Sinmara had been devastating, but it had also unified the remaining Asgardians in a way that peacetime hadn't managed. Izuku walked the streets with Sif, watching crews clear rubble and lay new foundations. People nodded to him as he passed, some called out greetings, others just smiled. Green Thunder. A young Einherjar saluted as they passed. Good to see you on your feet, sir. Thanks. Izuku waved awkwardly. And you don't have to call me sir. Yes sir. Sif chuckled. Give up. They've decided to worship you. You can't fight it. I'm not a god. You're something gods haven't been in a long time. Trustworthy. She steered him toward a quieter section of the city. There's something I want to show you. She led him to the observatory, the rebuilt structure at the end of the Bifrost Bridge. The rainbow road stretched out before them, and through the open dome, the sky showed all 9 realms in crystalline clarity. When Odin stood here, Sif said, he saw enemies. Threats to be managed, realms to be controlled. When Thor stood here, he saw people to protect. And when Kratos stood here. She paused. He saw a way out. What do you see? I used to see responsibility. Duty. The weight of everything that needed doing. She turned to him. Now I see possibility. Izuku looked out at the realms. Midgard, green and blue and alive. Vanaheim, wild and beautiful. Alfheim, shimmering with light. Even the darker realms, Svartalfheim, Helheim, the recovering Muspelheim, had their own stark beauty. "It's incredible," he said. "It's yours." Sif's voice was quiet. "If you want it. I don't want to rule anyone." "Then don't rule. Protect. Guide. Do what you've been doing, show up, fix problems, fight what needs fighting, and be the person people turn to when things go wrong." She took his hand. "You don't need a throne to lead, Izuku. You just need to be here. What if I find a way home?" The question hung between them. It was the thing none of them had talked about, the elephant in the room that everyone acknowledged but no one addressed directly. "Do you want to go home?" Sif asked. Izuku thought about it. Really thought, for the first time since the battle. His world, his friends, his mentors, the life he'd built. All Might, Bakugo, Uraraka, everyone at UA. They were still there, probably wondering what happened to him, searching for a way to bring him back. But here he had purpose. Here he had people who needed him, who cared about him, who had fought beside him and bled beside him and held him while he healed. "I miss them," he said honestly. "I'll always miss them. But I'm needed here. And the people here are your people now." Sif squeezed his hand. "You can say it. They're my people." The words felt right. True in a way that went beyond logic or obligation. "You're my people." Sif smiled, the full, unguarded smile that she rarely showed anyone. "Then stay." "I'm staying." She pulled him close and kissed him, there in the observatory with the 9 realms spread out beneath them. Not a warrior's kiss this time, something softer, slower, with layers of emotion that they'd both been too busy surviving to explore. When they broke apart, Izuku noticed movement at the observatory entrance. Hildr, Air, Gondel, and Freya had appeared, drawn by some combination of curiosity and the unspoken understanding that important things were happening. "Are we interrupting?" Hildr asked, grinning. "Yes," Sif said, not releasing Izuku's hand. "Good. We're doing it anyway." Hildr walked to Izuku's other side and took his free hand. "Because if you think you're having romantic moments without me, you're delusional. This isn't I wasn't." Izuku felt his face heat up, a reaction so fundamentally him that even divine power and realm choosing couldn't override it. "He's blushing," Air observed, joining them. "I wasn't sure he could still do that after facing down Sinmara." "Some things are more terrifying than primordial fire entities," Gondel noted, consulting her ever-present notebook. "Emotional vulnerability, for instance. Are you taking notes on this? For posterity. Future generations will want to know how the realm chosen reacted to being surrounded by women who care about him." Gondel's pen scratched across the page. "Current reaction, stammering, flushed skin, elevated heart rate." Gondel, I swear, Freya was the last to approach. She moved through the group with the grace of someone who had been a queen for millennia, and she stopped directly in front of Izuku. "You said you're staying," she said. "Yeah. And you understand what that means? Not just the fighting and the rebuilding, but all of it." He looked at the women around him. Sif, strong and steady, the rock he could build on. Hildr, fierce and passionate, the fire that pushed him to be better. Air, gentle and perceptive, the healer who saw him truly. Gondel, brilliant and dedicated, the mind that matched his own. And Freya, ancient and wounded and slowly, painfully learning to trust again. "Yeah," he said. "I understand." Freya reached out and took his hand, the one Hildr wasn't holding, and the circle closed. 5 women. One confused, battered, impossibly lucky mortal from another dimension. "Then we have a ceremony to plan," Freya said. The ceremony happened a week later, once Izuku was fully recovered and Air had cleared him for activity. It wasn't a coronation, Izuku had been adamant about that. And it wasn't a wedding, despite what Hildra kept calling it. It was something new. Forseti officiated, standing at the center of the great hall in full ceremonial regalia. The surviving Aesir, Vanir, and Valkyries filled the space, hundreds of people who had fought, bled, and rebuilt together. "We gather to recognize what has already been proven," Forseti announced, his judgment power lending weight to every word. "In the trial of worth, in the battle of Asgard, and in every day since his arrival, Izuku Midoriya has demonstrated a truth that defies our oldest traditions." He paused, and his eyes found Izuku in the crowd. "Worth is not born. It is not inherited. It is not claimed through blood or conquest. It is earned, through action, through sacrifice, through the daily choice to stand between danger and those who cannot defend themselves." Forseti raised his hands. Golden light filled the hall. "By the authority vested in me as the last surviving judicator of Asgardian law, and by the unprecedented response of the realm itself, I declare Izuku Midoriya to be realm chosen. Not king. Not ruler. Not conqueror. The one chosen by Asgard to be its heart, its protector, its living bridge between what was and what will be." The title hadn't been used in millennia. Gondal had found it in ancient texts, older than Odin, older than the current age, from a time when the realms chose their guardians through merit rather than might. Izuku stepped forward. He wore no crown, carried no scepter. His hero costume had been repaired and modified by Asgardian craftsmen, incorporating reinforced panels and runic stitching that Freya had blessed, but it was still recognizably his. Still green. Still him. The Valkyries swore themselves next. Not as servants, Izuku had been emphatic about that, but as equals who chose to stand with him. Hildra went first, driving her spear into the stone floor and kneeling with a grin that suggested she was already planning their next spar. The other Valkyries followed. Each one met his eyes as they made their pledge, and Izuku met each gaze in return, accepting not just their service but their trust. Sif took her place at his right hand, the traditional position of the realm's first warrior. She didn't kneel. She stood, drew her sword, and held it point down in front of her. "Where you go, I go," she said. "Where you fight, I fight. Not because you command it, but because I choose it." Freya took his left, the position of the realm's counselor. A Vanir queen standing beside an Asgardian protector, bridging a divide that had lasted since before recorded history. "I offer my wisdom, my power, and my trust," she said. "All of which have been earned." Gondal stood at the war table, already organizing the tactical implications of the new political structure. Air stood among the healers, her quiet smile visible even from across the hall. Forseti completed the ceremony with words that, for once, contained no bitterness or rivalry. "Let the 9 realms know, Asgard stands. Not because of divine right or ancient prophecy. But because one mortal chose to fight for people who weren't his own, in a world that wasn't his home. And in doing so, made it his." The hall erupted in cheering that shook the remaining walls. That night, after the crowds dispersed and the celebrations wound down, Izuku stood at the highest point of the observatory. The Bifrost stretched below him, rainbow light playing across his face. The 9 realms turned in their eternal dance, visible through the dome's opening. He wasn't alone. He was never alone anymore. Sif leaned against his right side, her sword finally sheathed, her body language relaxed in a way he'd never seen before the battle. Hildra sat on the railing to his left, legs dangling over the edge of the Bifrost, wings folded behind her. Air stood close behind him, her hand resting lightly on his back. Gondal was off to one side, notebook in hand but not writing for once, just watching the stars. Freya stood at the dome's edge, looking out at the realm she'd once ruled and then abandoned. Her expression was calm. Present. Here. "You know," Izuku said into the comfortable silence, "when I crashed into that lake 3.5 weeks ago, I thought my life was over." "Your life was just starting," Sif said. "You just didn't know it yet." "Yeah." He looked at the realms, his realms now. Guess so. Freya turned from the window. Do you miss your world? He thought about it. Really considered the question, with the honesty these people deserved. Yes, he said. I'll always miss it. The people I left behind, the friends I made, the mentor who gave me everything. He paused. But this is where I'm needed. And these are the people I love. That's enough. That's more than enough. Sif pressed closer against his side. You know, for a mortal, you're not terrible. Hildra snorted. High praise from Lady Sif. Quietly from behind him, he's extraordinary, and you all know it. Gondel looked up from her star chart. Statistically speaking, the odds of a mortal from another dimension becoming the realm-chosen protector of Asgard are, Gondel, everyone said simultaneously. Astronomically low. He's special. That's my point. Freya said nothing. She crossed the space between them, her steps silent on the observatory floor, and took his hand. Her fingers were warm, warmer than they'd been when they first met, as if the ice she'd carried for so long was finally melting. Izuku stood there, on the highest point of a realm that had chosen him, surrounded by women who had fought beside him, bled beside him, and decided, each in her own way, for her own reasons, that he was worth believing in. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. More battles, probably. More challenges. Realms to rebuild, alliances to forge, threats they hadn't even imagined yet. But he'd face all of it. With them. Together. The 9 realms turned slowly in the darkness, and at the center of the golden city, green lightning flickered once, a quiet pulse of power, of promise, of a future being written by people who refused to let the old stories define them. Izuku Midoriya smiled. He was home. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.